I knew you'd be at that crack already. I mean, for a lad who woke up late in terms of the preparation of the show this morning, you're some lad for acting like you've been up for the last 2 hours.
Perception is reality.
Yeah, it sure is. How are things with you? Looking forward to Punchestown this weekend?
Yeah, all good. Yeah, there the last couple of days. Massive upsets there yesterday. Good old crowds. Bit of crack, bit more relaxed than Cheltenham. And would you believe, actually tipping a couple of winners, which is rare.
Geez, speaking of winners, last week, so we did myself and Bernie were driving down to Rowan Moore in County Waterford there on Friday to do the club fundraiser, which is absolutely brilliant with Brick and Shane Dowling. But on the way down, Bernie has I think the term you used is you had the hair on the tail of a horse.
Yeah,
so basically you had a small ownership of a horse. And we stopped off in, was it Killucan?
Kilcullen.
Or Kilcullen, sorry. And we said we'd go in to watch it. I looked to see what was in the wallet. There was a few small pound in there, and we said, sure, look, we'll throw it on your horse called Matt Connor, of course, Offaly legend. And you know what, like, I don't have much interest in horses. Let's call it a spade. I know nothing about it. But I was getting stressful watching you getting stressed out. And midway through the race, I was like, many more furlongs in this? And you just said 5 or something like that. So I was like, geez, this is getting tasty. So, and tell us what you were feeling as Matt Connor was clear, but was being tracked down by the next horse.
I just couldn't believe how well he was travelling throughout the race, and you're just kind of looking at it and you're just thinking, oh, like, when's he gonna slow down or whatever? And he just kept going, and then a couple of horses came to him, and the most that, like, you could have a horse that could win a race by 7 or 8 lengths, and that's great. Or you could have a horse that shows a bit of heart and a bit of resolution and a bit of resilience, and he did that, and he won by a neck after, and I hit you an unmerciful sog into the chest.
No, it was right into the pit of the stomach, but luckily I have a bit of cushion in there at the moment, so you couldn't quite get through to the.
I didn't hit you half hard enough anyway.
Yeah, well, look, delighted to say we've got Colm Spillane joining us from Cork. Hopefully he's appeared on the screen there now. I'll try and go out and back in again. I think his screen is just frozen, so maybe Colm can click back in as well. Looking forward to speaking to Colm. We had him down at a coaching clinic not so long ago, and he was brilliant, just explaining different parts of the art of defending. So we'll get his thoughts on all the things.
He's in the dark, and the man knew a good bit about the dark arts of defending, it would be fair to say too.
Yeah, no, excellent defender. It's such a shame that he had to retire at the age of 28. Because he looked like he was all set for a very big couple of years for Cork. We're going to have a little quiz with you about the Punchestown Festival a little bit later on. Our regular viewer, Richard Hogan, has been good enough to send in a few questions. So if it slips my mind, either the viewers, will you let us remind me to come back to those questions, or Michael, you remind me yourself. We have a comment or two coming in already. CCCC to review Seamus Flanagan challenge on Stephen Bennett versus Limerick red card. That's from Test Case. And Bernie's dog loves a bit of camera action on the show. He was just over your shoulder there a minute ago.
Yeah. Just on the Bennett one, my understanding of that was that they had actually discussed it during the game. And you know the way you say, oh, when the yellow card thrown out, that they've dealt with or made a decision already. My understanding was that they had discussed it. And I believe now, my independent colleague, Colin Keys, was saying that what they discussed or what they talk about during the game is actually recorded now, and you can go back and listen to it or whatever. So I'm not sure if anything's going to come of that.
Yeah. Colm, how are things with you this morning?
Hi, Shane. Yeah, not too bad. Sorry, no, there's a small bit of trouble with the link again, but can you hear me now and stuff okay?
We can indeed. Coming through loud and clear. Colm, we were just talking about some of the tasty challenges that we're seeing last week in the Limerick against Waterford game. There was skin and hair flying. What did you make of all that? I mean, you were no, I suppose you weren't too shy when you were out there yourself, but what did you make of it?
Yeah, I suppose like looking at even all the other sports, like obviously rugby now is big at the moment, and even soccer, like the concussion issue is becoming a massive thing, and I suppose rightly so because of the long-term effects. And like I think they have tried to clamp down a big time the connection to the head, particularly like when people are going at speed and stuff. And like if you look at 2 incidents last week, I think the Flanagan one, like definitely, I know it probably looked worse in the replay. I don't think he really meant to line it up at the start, but at the same time, like it was quite reckless. So I do think that was definitely a red card. And Garrod Haggard is one I thought. No, it didn't really show a replay, but I thought that nearly could have been a straight red as well. You know, it was very, very heavy contact, and it seemed to kind of get him straight into the head as well. You can see by the reaction from the players. So, look, I think to be fair to the players, I think the referees are going to have to come out really strong, Croke Park, and say either the challenge is completely banned at the straight red all the time, or they're going to still allow it, because at the moment, like some people are getting away with it, like Flanagan got a yellow, a lot of fellas get a yellow for it, and then people give out them and they say it should be red that everyone's going against Limerick. But I do think it should be a red card for the player's safety going forward, definitely.
There's a duty of care as well on the man giving the tackle. Like the same as rugby, like there's a duty of care. You tackle him and you make it as fair as possible or whatever. But some of those, yeah, Flanagan's one, I know the slow-mo definitely makes it look a bit worse, but at the end of the day, his shoulder was still there, and even his elbow was even slightly raised as well. And I suppose with Hegarty, when you're 6'5" and you're putting in a tackle on a guy who's 5'10", there is a duty of care on you to, if you're trying to hit that it's on the money. And a lot of the time, like, listen, 6'5" and 5'10", if you meet straight on, it's going to be up around the head realistically. So I think there's a fair onus on the tackler as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, like, technically shoulders are supposed to be going the same direction, by the kind of letter of the law. And we heard about that maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Before that, there was nothing about it. Like, you get away a lot. As long as you didn't hit a fella directly in the head, you'd get away with going in for a big hit, even from the full back line coming out, trying to take a fella, you get away with it. Whereas they are really trying to clamp down on it now. And I think, as you said, like, they are the dangerous tackles, the big collisions to the head. So I think definitely, but I would say from a player's point of view, it should be stronger from Croke Park and referees. They should come out very black and white and say, look, this isn't going to be allowed. Show them exactly what it is. This is a red card. This is a red card. And I think players won't be long clamping down on it then.
Do you know, Colm, I saw a couple of people, actually. Sean Flynn, former hurling analyst, was on a Tipcast show with me yesterday, and he reckoned that Waterford were taking off the helmet a lot to sort of impress upon the referee some of the tackling coming in for Limerick. And I remember myself and Bernie a couple of years ago talking about a Cork-Limerick game, and I think there was like 5 or 6 times in that game that Cork lads took off the helmet. Now, it could have been just pure coincidence, Colm, but is it one of those things where maybe a couple of years ago that you might have done that intentionally to draw the ref's attention, or do teams in general do that?
Yeah, I think I suppose it's probably more forwards that would be told to kind of do that. But I think definitely if there's a big hit, to take off your helmet. I suppose like every aspect of the game now is being analysed, and people have probably thought, look, if there is a big hit. Now, to be fair to players, your natural reaction probably is, if you get a very big hit or you get rattled, to probably take off the helmet. All right, but yeah, like it's definitely more a bit more cynical in the GA than it was certainly 5 or 6 years ago. You see that in rugby, you see it in hurling. With the way the video analysis is at the moment, every single thing is analysed down to the absolute T. Every tackle, why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why did the referee give that free? So I think definitely players are very calculated out there nowadays through all the video analysis they do, through all the what they're told by coaches. So I think it's definitely coming into the game more, yeah. And I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon either.
Michael?
Yeah, well, just like, listen, the whole cynical element of it, like there's no point in saying any different, and we hate to see it, but there's more and more diving coming into the game as well. Lads, I've no problem, and you would have been the same, Colm. Lads are always trying to, buy a free off you or whatever. And, I think that's a little bit different, a bit of cuteness, but this actual blatant kind of going to the ground and even looking to the referee for a lad to get a card or something like that. I think we're on a slippy enough slope with some of the things in our game, if we want to keep it. Hurling is one of the purest games out there, but there are definitely elements that are probably souring it a bit, and it's definitely been heightened a lot more in the last 4 or 5 years, I would say.
Yeah, John Collins says, I believe taking off the helmet means the game has to stop. The ref can't continue while the player isn't wearing a helmet.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And Detox 101 says, Shane, you may have missed a proper foul with the hurley against your own team on Sunday. Sunday game has a replay of it. Now I was in bed early because I was heading to Sheffield to the old Crucible on Monday. Look at that there. So I'm actually not sure what he's referring there. Do you know what he's talking about, Mike?
Not 100% which one he's referring to. I was actually chatting to someone who was in the Crucible yesterday for what was one of the most dramatic days in the history of the Crucible. Couldn't believe Ronnie lost 7 in a row. Like, that's unprecedented. And then the number 80 ranked player in the world beats Anthony McGill last night in an epic as well. It's just mad. The whole thing is opened up now. I don't know if either of you own a house yet, but if you do, put it on Selby, because I'm telling you, he is not losing from here.
Yeah, I saw him the other day. I was only 3 rows back. It was class. Colm, unless you have a big interest in snooker and you want to say something about that.
Yeah, not really, no. Yeah, stick with the hurling for today.
Yeah. In terms of Cork, where do you think, they obviously had the heads down there last weekend watching everyone else knock the snot out of each other. But how do you think Cork are shaping up coming into this weekend against Waterford?
I think it's probably the hardest team Cork had to pick in years, and if you look from last year, you would have said the main players that will be leading Cork's last year, definitely Robbie O'Flynn, Sean O'Donoghue, Alan Connolly, the way he played all last year, Mark Coleman, Darragh Fitzgibbon, Tim O'Mahony. These are the fellas now who are really into their prime, 25, 26, who are yet obviously to win in All-Ireland, but all extremely talented. And throughout the league, those 6 players have hardly seen any league time. Obviously, Mark Coleman and Alan Connolly aren't available. Donald Manny was saying that last week, but the rest of the lads, I think they've played maybe 1 league game each, half a league game, but Darragh Fitzgibbon hasn't played any league game, so it's extremely hard to say how they'll do. And if you look at one positive from Cork, they blooded an awful lot of players throughout the league, but I think there was very few players really put their hand up saying, geez, that fella will definitely start in the league. Probably Owen Downey was one of them, and obviously he's the one that's actually suspended for the first game, so it's very... I thought Tom McConnell had a decent league, Paddy Power at times had a decent league, but there was no fella who played very well for 4 or 5 games, probably besides Owen Downey of the newer gang, who really, really impressed. So I think no one really knows what kind of a Cork team is going to go out and how fit are the lads. Some of them are back maybe a few weeks. I think Sean O'Donoghue has played very little, so I'm not sure will he be playing at the weekend, but it'll be interesting to see, definitely.
Just on that column as well, whatever about sitting back watching everybody last weekend, there's that element of the unknown with Cork this weekend. They don't have a game where they've realised, maybe we need to switch cornerback to fullback. Maybe Roach works better here, or do you know what I mean? They're going to be learning on the job a good bit at the weekend, and the Munster Championship is no place to probably be learning on the job.
Yeah, definitely. Ideally, you probably want 2 or 3 fellas making their championship debut, coming into a relatively settled team. You don't want 5 or 6 in different positions and fellas who didn't play there throughout the league, really. The A versus B games will be very good, and they've had a training camp a couple of weeks ago and stuff, but it's very, very, I don't know, I think even Pat Ryan himself, he'll be wondering, really wondering how we're going to get on this weekend. It's very, very, very hard to call.
Colm, when you're training and preparing for a championship match, like a big opener, and the management get this idea that, geez, the lad is absolutely humming in training, they start him. But the players he's been marking in training are so different from, let's say, coming up against Limerick. So, you don't have Limerick-type players in Cork. You have some brilliant players, but they're a different type. So then you go out and those players, and I look at Tip last weekend and I'd be like, okay, some of these lads were probably humming in training, but they weren't prepared for the pace that Clare had, because Tip don't have that in internal matches. Do you think that's ever a problem for Cork when they come out into championship games, that they're not used to the physicality that they then face?
I think so, yeah. If you look at Limerick, they've really tried to, particularly the fellas who are just physically naturally gifted, the 6'4", 6'5" lads, big and strong, they really tried to develop their hurling, and it worked. Obviously, Paul Knopp was coach; he's a brilliant coach for them, but a lot of the bigger lads with Cork, you'd say that those big 6'4", 5" fellas, they've seemed to fall by the wayside. Maybe that's probably Cork's style of play. Obviously, there's huge pace in the team, so I think that could be an issue, could be a factor. But again, with the internal games, it's very hard to say until a fella hits championship, is he ready? Some fellas, most fellas who are playing really well in internal games, will probably go on to play well in championship. But you always have a couple of fellas every year then who are flying, and just obviously the heat of championship becomes a bit too hot for them, and maybe they're just not ready. Sometimes 19, 20, myself, I wasn't really ready at that age. It might be 22, 23 before you're fully ready to kind of as an inter-county player. So Cork have a lot of fellas in that age bracket, so it's going to be very hard to tell.
Really interesting point, Shano. I have to say there, really interesting point, because they, as you said, they are marking the same types of players probably in training. Whereas, like, if you look at let's say the boxing or the MMA, what do they do when they're fighting someone? They bring in someone of that style. So, like, realistically, you would want, if you're going playing Limerick, you would want giants coming into training. But that's not the way GA works. You work with whatever is in your squad. But saying that, before Ballyhale played, it was a Ballygunner this year, they brought a player from another club in to play the type of sweeper role that Ballygunner would play, which I thought was unusual, and they kept it all fairly hush-hush. But it's not something, that's not generally something that happens in the GA. You work with whatever you have within your own squad. But what Cork have within their own squad, as just to take Limerick as a case in point, like, they're not going to meet someone. You're not going to meet anything. It's hard to prepare for that. I suppose that's what makes it an even more difficult task.
Yeah, it reminds me, like, the 2017 Club All-Ireland. We knew we were going to come up against Gary Brennan in the All-Ireland final and thought maybe he'd play full forward. So there was a few dual lads who, primarily might play football, and one lad was brought in to sort of be that big pig in there who could run and give Keane O'Callaghan a chance to mark him a few times. So, I mean, teams do that. Colm, can you remind us of your debut and how your championship debut now I'm talking about, and your thoughts and feelings going into that first big game? Because a lot of players are kind of going through that in the last week or so.
Yeah, I made my debut in 2017. It was actually against Tip, but I had done my cruciate previous year, 2016. So I did that in February. So I was obviously out for the whole year, but I had a bank of training done. It was definitely the best I'd ever done in my career. I was back kind of full training, and it was nearly October, November by myself, and then as the team would come back. And I remember I was probably 7 months. I'd never felt as fit. I played every single league game. I played every challenge game. So while I was nervous, I really felt I was 22, I think, as well. So, I was maybe it's that small bit older, and I really felt ready to play. And obviously that game against Tip,
you hammered us.
We managed to win it. Yeah, it was a great game down in Thurles, and Tip were obviously the All-Ireland finals from the previous year. But like, if you're ready, if you have that bank of training done, you've done everything you can. While you will be nervous there, I was still very confident that I was going to perform well. But there's nothing like it. There's nothing to compare you. As soon as the whistle goes, the pitch is out there, the stadium is full. Like, there's nothing can prepare you for that really until you're there. And it does take that first couple of balls. As soon as you get in, the nerves go away. But yeah, and there's going to be a lot of lads like that this weekend. So best of luck to them. It's a brilliant feeling, and hopefully they'll be ready for it too.
And the bus on the way into Thurles, I presume you went up over the hill and all that kind of stuff where the bridge is. Do you remember that? The feeling of seeing thousands of people around?
Yeah, definitely. And again, like, you're not going to be prepared for it when you haven't played championship. I know you'd be on championship panels and stuff, but just the crowds, and you're kind of, everyone's waving. It's like you're trying to get through a sea of bodies just to get onto the bus. And even you might have your headphones in or be chatting away, but the noise is deafening, because what do people do as soon as they see the bus? Everyone starts cheering. The Tip fans will start booing. So it's yeah,
typical Tip.
That wouldn't be in it. Wouldn't be in it.
Yeah. But it's brilliant. Like, like, obviously you'd never feel so alive and feel so excited to play and stuff. But it's a brilliant feeling. But definitely it can be too much for a lot of fellas, particularly when fellas are younger, or even fellas who've been around a long time getting their chance. It can all go very wrong in 10 or 15 minutes as well.
Are you enjoying the current hurling? I see a lot of people giving out about hurling at the moment because of, I suppose, the middle is so condensed. I mean, I was down at the Clare Tipperary game, and it was 2v2 at one end of the pitch, 2v2 in the other 14, and then everyone else in the middle. Do you like what you're seeing at the moment?
It's definitely not the spectacle it used to be. As I said, even go back to 2017, 2018, it wasn't, tactics were definitely obviously really in there, and there was a lot of analysis, but it wasn't the level it is now. There's almost a bit of paralysis by analysis at the moment. I think it's gone a bit way to football. Fellas are afraid to give away the ball, whereas when I started playing, possession wasn't that important. It was like, if you were a cornerback, you won the ball, you obviously look for a teammate, but you got rid of it. Whereas nowadays, it's every player, as soon as he gets the ball, he's looking around him, trying to pick out a pass. I think even going back to the goalkeeper that came in an awful lot a few years ago, it's probably definitely not the spectacle it was, but I'm not sure what they can do to change. There's talks of maybe only allowing 2 hand passes and keeping fellas inside. But again, I think the referees in hurling have an absolutely massive job every day anyway. How are they going to police stuff like that? I don't know. But yeah, look, obviously there's still going to be great games out there, but it's certainly a lot more tactical now than it used to be.
Yeah, Michael.
I'm just there's lots of comments coming in about that they're going, like, if we keep talking the way we are, they're going to have to ban the shoulder potentially. And P-Well74 just says, fellas getting a slap on the ankle now, take off the helmet. Like, in a way, say for like some of the big hits, like those big shoulders that are red card offences, is it too easy to pick up 2 yellows for very simplistic kind of things? Almost, you could be pulling a jersey or something like that, and you could be maybe mounting at a referee, and you could end up on the line, whereas somebody could run through someone like a bulldozer and only get a yellow. It's kind of peculiar in a way, and you would have seen it, Colm, as a defender as well. It's so easy to end up on a yellow. Like, I probably feared for Cottle Barrett the other day when I saw how quickly he picked up a yellow on Tony Kelly. Now, he stayed on the field, and then someone said to me that maybe Limerick should have been taken off Garone Hegarty once he got that yellow from Mountain, or taking him off at half time. Is it in a way, when you're with the 2 or 3 fouls, is it too easy to end up on the line now as well? Forget about the big hits now, just as in give away a free or give away a penalty, and you're really, really on the line about getting been sent off.
Yeah, like, definitely, especially when you're in the full back line, a 2-man full forward line, there's nothing worse than getting the yellow card in the first 10 or 15 minutes. It's a disaster. Like, you try and avoid it at all costs, but like, I think players are very quick to adapt. I got sent off once in Championship against Waterford. Again, I got a yellow after 20 minutes, bit rashed into the next challenge, and all of a sudden, then you're down to you're down to 14 men. But like, what could they do? Could they change that you're allowed that man has to go off, and then you're allowed to bring someone else back on? I don't know, but yeah, it definitely is very easy to pick up a yellow card, but I think players will adapt to whatever the rules are. Like, if you look at the black card, for example, everyone was giving out that came in. Like, you very rarely see anyone getting a black card, really, over the last 2 or 3 years. There's been very few instances of black cards. So once the players know the rules, they will be very quick to adapt. And when you're on a yellow card, for the majority of time, no, Hegarty, as we said, an experienced player like him, going in like that, thinking, I don't know how he wouldn't get a second yellow, like if he timed that any bit wrong. But you'd have to be careful. But again, it's part of the game. You kind of get 1 yellow. It's in your toolbook as a fullback, especially. But you have to be very careful then not to get the second one.
I think Barry Nash was very fortunate as well, not only because he tapped one on the head. I think we're all okay with a yellow card there. But then he came in, sort of like Hegarty did on Conor Deise. He did that on Colm Lyons. And then he also tripped Bennett inside the 14, but just to the side of the penalty area later on. So, like, he was very fortunate as well. Speaking of Barry Nash, that's a number 4 that likes to be up in the far 21. You often wore number 4, Colm. How do you deal with somebody like that? Like, if you're the opposition, or like, do you look at that and think, geez, I should be doing that?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I did like going forward a bit myself, but it was never beyond the halfway line. Do you know what I mean? Anything beyond the halfway line, I was coming back. I played a bit of forward when I was younger, but it's almost like he's a free man attacking. Like, you very rarely see him having to defend kind of one-on-one much, and he is able to do it. Like, but it's almost like he's a free roam going forward. He's like a +1 for Limerick, and he can just join the attack whenever he wants. So, yeah, he's obviously a brilliant player. He would have played the forwards when he was younger and stuff. But it's certainly a new tactic. But I think there's very few cornerbacks who can actually defend like a cornerback that he can. No, he's not an out-and-out cornerback. He wouldn't be a defender, Sean Finnis, for example. But he's like he's almost like a kind of a quarterback. He can do whatever he wants, roam up. He can take a point. He can score for goals. So, yeah, corner forward, you definitely wouldn't want the cornerback having 1-1 after the match. It's fairly demoralising.
Yeah, geez, he really is something else. One of the best players going at the moment. What are you thinking in terms of Waterford this weekend? They had a game last weekend. Obviously, now the injury to Tyke de Burka is huge, but I mean, Cork coming in against a team that has a game under their belt, is that advantage Waterford or advantage Cork, because maybe something will be taken out of them?
I would think it's definitely advantage Waterford. But the thing about Waterford, like, if you saw 2021 how hard they walked, they made it to All-Ireland final. Obviously, last in the league they were flying, but they don't have enough scoring forwards, I think. Like, you've Deise Hutchins, Stephen Bennett, who are real kind of out scoring forwards. That Fitzgerald fellow that came on now looked handy. He got a good score. But the rest of them, they work fierce hard. They're real team players, but they just, if you look at compared to the other counties, it's been their Achilles heel over the last 5 or 6 years. Their record in Munster has been very poor. They just don't seem to have enough fellas who can score from play. I think maybe they got 9 or 10 points from play the last day. Like, that's all in 70 minutes. Like, it's not really enough. They rely on Stephen Bennett an awful lot for frees. So they're just lacking a bit of firepower up front. But at the same time, I think that game against Limerick will bring them on massively, even confidence-wise. It was there for the taking, but again, their Achilles heel, not having enough scoring forwards, was their downfall.
Just on Colm's point, Shane, as well there, and I know a lot went right for them, and they probably could have added on maybe another 4 or 5 points, but it's still a light enough tally in the modern game, like 23 or 24 points, even if they had put a few over, you know. So like on Colm's point there, like maybe someone like Michael Kiley who let it up in the Fitzgibbon, he was probably disappointing the other day. They're going to need, you know, 3 or 4 lads really chipping in significantly up front. Probably Ozzy thrown in there, getting at least 2 to 3 scores from play. Because at times in the game the other day, they were really just hanging in on Stephen Bennett's frees. And just on that as well, and I know you don't like hammering any player, just Bennett's attitude to that free as well. Like that was just a bit of a killer. Like that's a 100% free. That's 100 out of 100. There's no way you miss something like that. And the fact that Nicky Quaid was able to put up his hurl, something like that can just, you know, pull energy out of you as well. But I'm sure they'll be trying to, like they probably played a certain way last week to try and stifle Limerick. Maybe they'll be a bit more open against Cork. Maybe they won't, you know, they probably should, but maybe they won't fear that Cork can hurt them maybe as much as Limerick could.
And Colm, like, who are the players that you think might make the step up? This, like, if you're looking at let's say the middle 8, how do you see Cork being picked here? Do you see the likes of the Roaches getting a game in here?
Yeah, they could start. I personally think Brian Roche probably won't. I think he'd be one of the first subs on because you can bring him on anywhere in the midfield, half hour, and he'll definitely get game time. I don't think he'll start. I think Tommy O'Connor will probably start wing back. I would say he'd probably make his debut. Kieran Joyce will definitely start. Like Darragh Fitzgibbon, I'm hearing he's supposed to be back fully fit. Like, so I think they'll throw him in midfield, even though he doesn't really have much played. So yeah, Robert Downey would probably be the other wing back, I would say. But again, like there really is about 25, 30 fellas, and there's very little between them. There's very few fellas you'd say will definitely start with Cork on Sunday, which is a good thing in some ways, but at the same time, you definitely want your team more settled. There'll be, I think there'll be a lot of changes. Cork will definitely use 5 or 6 subs, and because there's not much between a lot of lads who are playing, I think.
Yeah, and who do you think will go full back? I mean, obviously it's a position you know very well, and Owen Downey isn't there, like you said. So what's the best solution for Cork at the moment?
And I don't think Sean O'Donoghue will be fit. Like, I would say it'll probably be a 2-man full back, and I would say Niall O'Leary and probably Damien Cahalane. I think we go full back, I would say. He had a very good year last year, in fairness to him. Obviously, he missed a lot of the league too, so I think he will probably start full back, if I had to say. I don't think they'll put Rob Downey there. They'll keep him out in the wing if he's playing. I would think Damien Cahalane and Niall O'Leary will probably be the 2 inside. And yeah, I'm not sure who, to be honest, the other cornerback at the moment. Yeah, it's a very hard team to pick. Obviously, Conor O'Callaghan, Owen Roach, could be any of them.
And what's it like? Remember that a couple of years ago, you would have been playing in that game, Waterford against Cork in the All-Ireland semi-final. Do you obviously it was brilliant footage of Ozzie Gleeson's goal done on the game, that documentary. What's your memories of Ozzie coming through in that goal?
Yeah, I suppose I think we want to be down to kind of 14 minutes at that stage. Yeah, like at that time, in fairness, Waterford, like they were flying, they were super fit. And yeah, like it was one of those things. Like Gleeson, when he's soloing into the ball and he's on the run, he's very, very hard to stop. He's got so much pace, and he's obviously so big, and he seems to be able to look around when he has the ball. But yeah, I suppose things happen very quickly. You saw him running through. I kind of came out to get him. Obviously, he dummied in during that situation. I probably thought he passed it, and then he managed to finish it. But yeah, look, they really need him back 100% as well. No, his Achilles heel is obviously his shooting, his wides, but at the same time, on his day, he can be a real handful. He can be a brilliant player, so I think they'll need him back, definitely. He didn't look right the last day. You could see when he was running. I know Kyle Hayes is very fast, but he caught 5 yards up to him, whereas Gleeson would normally kind of pull away from fellas. So I don't think he's 100% either yet.
Michael, do you reckon that Waterford need to throw him in, or do you think they need to be like, right, we could end up losing him for the season here if we throw him back too quickly?
Yeah, I suppose they only know the severity of it or how much time they'll get out of him. But he hasn't started to finish the game all year, to the best of my knowledge. I think the only game he started, did he come off? He came off with the injury, actually, against Tipperary. That was the only game he started throughout the league. So if you combine his game time this year, Jesus, I'd say you're looking at about 150 minutes all told. So he hasn't played that much. Something I just put to you, Colm. We were always big fans of yours when you were playing. Is it difficult looking, the week of a championship game when realistically, if all was fair and well in the world, you'd be preparing to play a championship game. How difficult was that to adapt to?
Yeah, it is very difficult, to be honest. Now the only thing, like, I know myself, I just wouldn't be able for the training. I can't do it, and that the body can't do what it used to do. But like at the same time, sometimes I forget, like, you know, I'm only 29. Do you know what I mean? A lot of players went into their peak in these years. But it is difficult at times. But look, I'm hurling away with Castlelyons. I'm still, even though it's not playing with your county, like, it's still the same buzz when you go out there playing with your club and everything like that. So look, I'm still lucky to be playing myself. So obviously I'd love to be out there, but look, it wasn't it wasn't to be.
Just when you say you wouldn't have been able to do the training, was that just because of, you know, injury after injury that took their toll? Or
yeah, definitely, particularly my back. I've had a couple of a lot of disc issues with my back. I've had 2 surgeries. My knee, I don't have much cartilage in my left knee. I've had Achilles tendon problem. When I go through a hard period of training, a lot of things flare up very quickly. So like my knee would swell, say my back would be inflamed. So I've different things that would be at me that way. So if I went back training now, I wouldn't make it 2 weeks. Do you know what I mean? Genuinely. So I tried to do it in 2021, and I was kind of probably going downhill in 2020, 2021. I tried, and then I wasn't able to do it. So yeah, that's the way it goes.
Is it a case, Colm, like you can get away with that at club level, is in take a night off here and there, but it's not really acceptable inter-county almost now when you have lads coming through 21, 22 who can train nearly 7 nights of the week if you want.
Yeah, no, that's definitely it. And again, when do club trainings go back? Like, I've probably been back training in the middle of February this year. And again, it was twice a week for the first, I don't know how long, I was able to mind it. Whereas inter-county, you're probably back, well, officially the 1st of December. 3 nights
good man.
Absolutely flat out. Yeah. So if you're not match fit by the middle of January, you're not going to be considered. Do you know what I mean? And that wasn't able for that. But yeah, I'm going to have to head away there, lads. Actually, sorry. I have to go into school, so yeah.
No okay, Colm, brilliant to have you on the show.
See you, lads.
Thanks, Colm. Cheers.
Great to have Colm on the show as well, and get the Cork, get the Cork view on things at the moment, because they've very much been in, as we like to say, on the hind tit recently, because obviously the other teams were the ones preparing for championship while they had the week off. Is Pat Ryan the man to change Cork's fortunes?
You know, basically, I think every player on the squad, I think the only player on the squad that he hadn't worked with, and it's gas, I'm actually forgetting his name, he's gone back to the AFL, Mark Keane. He was the only player on the squad that he hadn't worked with through minor 20s and his coaching role with the seniors. So he knows them all well. I don't know. I find it hard to see anything major happening this year just because of Colm went through the bodies that they were missing there throughout the league. He hasn't really got a chance to, you know, have a settled team. And you're going into Munster now where you need to have a settled team and you need to know your starting 15. And I'd say there's some debate behind closed doors about who's actually, like as Colm said there as well, there's a lot of lads at a very, very similar level. So I'd say if they sat down on Monday, they could pick one team. If they sat down on Tuesday, they could pick a completely different team. I'd have a fair bit of faith in Pat now, I would have to say, and even just from dealings with him and just from getting the vibe from different fellas around the county about him. But I think it'll take a decent chunk of time. It'll take 2 to 3 years.
Very interesting to see if Patrick Horgan starts this weekend. He turns 35 very soon. He's just 11 points ahead of TJ Reid. I was looking at a piece from Eamon Murphy in the Cork Echo. Now, last year he was dropped at times, and we saw the likes of Tim O'Mahony, who's had his injury problems, but did come back at the latter stages of the league. Do you reckon Patrick Horgan's going to start this game, and should he?
I think he's a guaranteed starter. Yeah, I think Pat Ryan will veer towards most of the experienced players, just because he's a fair idea what he's going to get out of Horgan, Harnedy, and a few more of those guys. I think he will. It's you know, you are throwing lads in at the deep end. It's a difficult one. As Colm said there, you putting in 5 to 6 championship debutants, or are you putting in 2 or 3 mixed and blended with that bit of experience? I would say the latter. But that depends on whether Pat Ryan is looking at it. Am I managing for this game and this Munster Championship, or am I thinking of the long term and what X or Y or Z, a Pádraig Power is going to give me next year, or he's going to give me in 5 years. Do you know what I mean? So it's a difficult kind of balancing act, but I think he will lean more towards experience, and I do expect Horgan to start.
Other than Kieran Joyce at centre back, it's very difficult to nail down who's going to be where. Like, we're coming into this game a bit like, I suppose, Brian Lohan looking at the match programme with Tipperary last weekend. It was nothing only, the old panel numbers rather than, there it is. I think that's what Davy Fitz is looking at this week. He has no idea what Cork are going to produce, what sort of team they're going to... Look, to some degree he does. But like, it's in a way for Pat Ryan, he has a little advantage there because Waterford's hand has been shown last week. Maybe they'll start Ozzy, maybe there'll be a tweak or two here or there. They obviously have to put in someone else instead of Tadhg de Búrca at centre back. But I think there is a slight advantage in that for Pat Ryan.
Oh, there is definitely. He's got a good read on Waterford. I put it this way: I'm sure Davy and the lads have a dossier on every team that they're playing, but the biggest dossier they would have had was on Limerick. And as good as they were, and I have to say, as they got it tactically spot on, and they just weren't able to execute at the other end to push them over the line.
And I'll tell you why I'll say this. Stuff going flying on me there. But like early in the game, Limerick were all over them. So. You know, what did they tactically get spot on? I mean, I thought Limerick would do that third quarter takeover like they've been doing for the last couple of years, and that did not happen. And obviously the red card happened and it opened an opportunity for Waterford. But are you sure they got it tactically spot on? Or to some degree, did Limerick show a bit of indiscipline with all of that fouling that allowed Bennett to knock over Freeze before the half? And maybe Limerick thought they had the game won a little bit, and maybe it was the first time we saw a little bit of complacency, or the bull SH1T that... John Kiley spoke about afterwards, that seeped in a little bit.
Well, I just thought in the first quarter, Waterford looked a bit frazzled. Your brother talked about it on the Monday show. They just looked a bit frazzled. They were taking extra touches. They were doing things probably they shouldn't have been doing, but they had a couple of clear tactics that they definitely got a bit of joy out of. They peppered ball on top of Burns and put about 10 bodies around the breaking ball. They denied Kyle Hayes. They just kept the ball away from him generally. Like, he didn't get the chance to build up a head of steam. Nicky Quaid didn't have too many options on his puck out. You know, there was no Gearóid Hegarty running into an acre of space because they always had a man standing on one of the wings. I think they ruffled Limerick's feathers big time. And even, you know, the madness with the mentor coming down, and not condoning it or anything like that, but the whole thing kind of built up. Like, Limerick are, like, Hegarty is pointing, Connacht was going mad with the sideline official at one stage, Kiley was going mad. Like, they had them fairly well.
But it got under their skin, is what you're saying.
I think the big time got under their skin, and I think it's from a Limerick point of view, I think it's a great lesson because they basically learned all the lessons of a heartbreaking defeat without actually losing the match. But I do think Waterford got it fairly spot on outside of that first quarter, and they got themselves back into the game. They just weren't able to execute at the other end. Interested to see whether Patrick Fitzgerald starts and whether maybe Paddy Fitzgerald starts as well, and who slips in at 6. And the one thing about Tadhg de Búrca is it's one thing being able to adapt mid-game. I always found, even in a championship game, if someone got hurt, you could nearly step from cornerback to centre back mid-game because it's just...
Well, not you.
I actually have. I did once or twice, but then it's like you're actually starting centre back and it's a different kettle of fish. Someone's going into that spot and they're starting there. And I know Fagan has kind of slipped into that position a bit maybe more this year, but de Búrca's loss will only be felt in the next game and the next game after that. It wasn't necessarily felt the other day. If anything, they raised their game in his absence the other day, but they're really going to feel his loss over the coming weeks.
Yeah, so I mean, they'd love to have Iarla Daly step in. Like, Calum Lyons is going to play there. Sure, you know, realistically, it's going to be Calum Lyons. And
now, the only thing about that is that probably pulls back him a small bit. I know they might have another man maybe sitting a bit deeper, potentially behind him. But if that takes away, like, Waterford needed him to score 4 points from play the other day. And if he had, Waterford would have won the game. But he was preoccupied with another role. If you get me.
And if he wasn't doing that other role against Keane Lynch, you know, they might have got opened up. I mean, has anyone ever played as well on Keane Lynch? And no doubt Calum Lyons, you know, was kind of on the edge throughout that battle. But sure, where else are you going to be? And that's what Limerick are doing when they want to win these big games. I'm just going to go through some of the comments here. I find some of them quite interesting. Lads, lots of talk about Limerick being very competitive. The same starting 15 and same 5 subs the last 5 years. Keane Lynch laughing with the ref at half-time. Is there really competition in their team? I'd say so. I mean, look, I don't think it's the same 15, and I don't think it's the same subs, because Richie English was always starting, then Mike Casey broke his way in, then Barry Nash broke his way in. Peter Casey was in and out for a little while, and now he's become a mainstay. Cathal O'Neill is pushing. Maybe we'll see more of Colin Coughlin and Adam English as time goes on as well. I agree sort of broadly that it's a lot of the same players, but it's not all of the same players. There is sort of elements. There's elements of that that's fair, and there's elements of that I think is slightly exaggerated.
Yeah, the squad has changed quite a bit. I was only looking at a quote from Grode Hegarty from last week where he was saying he has a picture of the 2018 All-Ireland squad in his house, I think, and he just said he looks at it every now and then and just sees how the panel has changed massively since then. And the personnel on the team has changed a bit as well. Probably something we need to talk about at some stage as well. It's like Declan Hanlon's going to be out for the guts of a month, and he could be back for the Cork game. But it's one thing putting Dan Morrissey in centre back, and Dan is a very, very solid player and will play that role and hold that role. But he's not a quarterback like Hannon. He's not going to score from 100 yards like Hannon. He's not going to go forward like Hannon. He's not going to deliver those really crisp kind of triangular passes to get them moving from defence. So his loss will definitely be felt. And it was felt the other day as well.
Yeah. Has a dummy ever been spat further than that by Tipperary, Shane? Must be a record in terms of the team the other day. We haven't really talked about that since, because obviously I wasn't here on Monday. But I just think every team is now going to do this. For me, it was fine because, when you're so familiar looking at your own county all the time, I mean, I didn't need to look at the numbers to know who was on the ball. You just know by the go heck of them. So, and like I'm sure you were the same as well watching that game. But for other people who aren't, I mean, I know people who said that, again, and they'd know them just by looking at them. But they were constantly having to tell people in the crowd who was on the ball there. So I'm sure it was very frustrating. But at the same time, if you're the manager and you get that free hit in terms of like making it more confusing for the opposition, why wouldn't you take it?
Yeah, listen, I still think there's something probably sacrosanct about 1 to 15. I know when you were playing, and when you always wanted something that was 1 to 15. It's probably something that's going to be phased out a bit. Listen, from a marketing ploy, like let's just say if it was Noel McGrath 23, I think is it who wears 23? Is it Johnny Ryan wears 23? I'm just thinking
David Beckham, LeBron James previously.
Yeah. Michael Jordan would be the first one that would come to mind anyway. But just that maybe that's a sort of thing where someone was saying it the other day that it's McGrath on the back is 23 and fans know that that's his number for that year or whatever, or it's Seamus Kennedy 7, or you know what I mean. And potentially there's a marketing tool there. I still think there's something sacrosanct about the 1 to 15. But the GA have backed teams into a bit of a corner here as regards when they have to release their teams or release their squad to the public. So Liam Cahill does not know his team when he's releasing it to Croke Park. He's a fair idea. But they train on the Friday night if they're playing on a Sunday, which they will be most of the time through Munster. And he names his team on Friday night. And it should always be the case that the players are the first to know what the team is. So if he wants to go with squad numbers as a way of potentially, getting away from that, well, then I think that's fair game too. It looks hideous on the programme and it will devalue the programme, I would say, as well in time. And I was actually at... So over in Edinburgh about 6 weeks ago, and it was at Hibs. Hibs were playing in the Scottish League, and I just wanted to get a souvenir program, and they don't have them anymore. They don't. The team is named online, and if you want to look at it, you look at the Hibs Twitter, and it's probably something maybe that's going to be edged out in time in the GA. But I love the pro. I love going in, love looking at it, love reading a few bits. Me and you do a few bits for some of the All Ireland programs as well. Yeah, and that's I think it's a lovely thing to have in time as well. But it's definitely been devalued a bit in that way. Like maybe if it's a case where Tip at least name their starting 15, even if they're in the squad numbers, and have the subs in their numbers on the bench as well. Just maybe not like that.
So what I think teams or the people who are making the program should do at this stage is have the 26 named at the side of the sort of, okay, so I'll just bring it up here. So you've got the middle page there with obviously the 26 are named in different manners. But what if you just had the 26 fully named there, and then you had that 15 laid out in whatever shape you like. Obviously, it doesn't have this tradition. Teams don't line out like that anymore, realistically. It's always 2 men inside. But what if you had sort of like the jerseys drawn out like that, and then you had just blank spaces to fill in the names that you'd populate from here? I think that would make more sense. And if they had the squad numbers, you wouldn't have to write in the full names. You just have the squad. You just write in the squad numbers. And I think people being able to just fill it out themselves, that would actually add something to it. You know, we've got an issue here. Let's turn it into an opportunity.
How tricky was it for you to put in, Noel McGrath, P, when you were adding up the scores? Was it anyway tricky?
Very, because you can see there, I know it's obviously a little bit difficult to see it, but I have a certain amount of like 0.1 beside the Clare lads. I didn't even bother for tip.
Yeah, when you're reporting on a game, or even as a spectator, it's just, that 8 is here and you put a P beside it when he gets a point. That 15, Jason Ford, free, goal, pen, or whatever. Whereas there, you'd be 10 or 15 seconds trying to find until you eventually know what their numbers are. And it'll take by the end of the season by the time we know what numbers they're all wearing the whole time,
Yeah. So I'm just going to go through some more comments here. Come on, how's Waterford's hand shown? The reason I say Waterford's hand is shown compared with Cork is because Pat Ryan has a fair idea of the Waterford team that's going to line out, whereas Davy Fitz, in relative terms, knows far less of what Waterford are going to do. That's what I mean. Not necessarily that it's, that Cork can't win or Waterford can't win this game. Waterford will put manners on Cork this weekend. Kiley does get rattled a good bit when things go against him. He's had a few rants after games now. Good to see some emotion from a successful manager, different to Stone Cold Jim Gavin or Brian Cody. If Galan had put away 2 goal chances, that result would have looked different. That is also true. Richard Hogan says Conor Brown in 2019 on Keane Lynch. That was the last time.
It's funny, Shano, now he says that, and this was like, to me, this was the closest Limerick have come to being beaten, really, because someone actually had the chances to beat them. They came close to being beaten last year, but I don't think a team had the chances to beat them like Waterford had. And look at it, Keane Lynch was kept very, very quiet on both occasions, that 2019 semi-final and again the other day. I don't this idea of Keane Lynch laughing with the referee going in at half time, I would not be reading one iota into that. Not one iota. That's just like the Sunday game always showed that picture of him and Finn having a right sneer on the bench while the picture has been taken before one of the All-Irelands. That's just the way he is. I wouldn't read a jot into that. And I'd expect to see a different player come Saturday night as well. He will be bouncing and mad for road after being quiet the other day.
Yeah, PWell74 says Limerick players are all the right age. No older players on the team. I mean, Declan Hannon's probably the oldest, and I'd say he's, 30?
Nicky Quaid would be older. Declan, I think, would be the oldest. Declan and Dan Morris would be the oldest outfield players, yeah.
Yeah, so look, I think they've definitely got another couple of years to stay at the top anyway.
Just Shane, on Waterford, do you think Waterford can get up again within a week to the levels that they were at last Sunday? When you take in the debilitating loss to Tyke de Borca, like, not being smart, it's a high energy game that they're playing as well. It's a very, very high energy game. The kind of, it was a morale sapping loss as well. It could have been a real morale boosting loss. I just think it's going to leave a bit of an effect. I don't expect them to be as fresh this weekend. I don't expect them to be bouncing as much. I think they could be susceptible to Cork at the weekend.
Do you know what? On that, before I answer your question, Pao K has a comment, and he says, I think that was a bigger bottle job from Waterford than last year's fixture. Extra man off from Limerick with no Hannon, and had to convert that into a W. I do think, in a way, like, the opportunity was just massively there for them. Aaron Gallan missed that penalty at the 45th minute. A couple of minutes later, Hegarty goes off, and then they just miss chances all the way home from then on. I definitely think they left it behind them. Like, in the second half, their scoring conversion rate was 9 out of 23. And you look at Limerick, it was 8 out of 15. They were far more economical. And do you remember last year we were coming into the championship, and when everyone was teeing up Waterford to be the second best team in the country and that they could do this, that, and the other, Kieran Carey was on our show, and he was asking, do Waterford have the emotional composure to make their way through the season? And as it turned out, by hook or by crook, whoever you want to blame or whatever, they didn't. And will they have it for this game now? Because of all the games left, I would suggest that this is the most winnable game for Cork against Waterford, because I think they're going to, and I suppose you could say the same way for Waterford, this is their most winnable game. They tended to have the hex over Cork in the last couple of years. Waterford against Tip, can you imagine how fired up Tipperary are going to be? And Tip's calendar has worked out fairly nicely in the sense that they had a game, now they have a week off, then they have a game, then they have a bit of time to prepare again. So I actually think it's going to be difficult for Waterford there. And Clare are obviously going to be, assuming that both teams are alive, that'll be a huge game as well. Of all the teams that are probably a little bit unsure of where they're at, I think it's Cork, and especially with the injuries. So I think if emotionally, and I mean, that's rugby nonsense talk in some ways, but psychologically, if
what's
Waterford
their culture like?
I know, but it really does have to be a huge Waterford performance here. If they're not zeroed in for this game, they could end up out of the championship.
Well, history in the Munster round robin would suggest that they won't back up, because they've only one win in the Munster round robin. They've only 3 points from a possible 26 so far. I think Cork might just about shade that. I think they'll have a bit of rustiness from having not played a competitive game since 5 or 6 weeks since they played Kilkenny in that league semi-final. But I think they might just see it out a bit better. And I put it this way: if it's a high-scoring game, like if it's 128 to 125, if it's that type of a game, I think Cork will win. Because I think if it's more free-flowing and open, I think they could put up a big score. And I think they might just get them down the stretch. Yeah,
so Cork have been winning tight games, to be fair, in the league this year. Brutal against Kilkenny. Didn't give up. They kept going even when Owen Downey got sent off. But, it was pretty poor. There was no getting away from it. Who's going to do the damage from this weekend? Is it going to be Horgan? Is it going to be Shane Kingston? Is it going to be Shane Barrett? I mean, who's going to step up? Harnedy.
Yeah, and I think Harnedy's as crucial to them on Sunday as he has ever been, to be honest with you, because they still don't have that type of... I don't know if Declan Dalton is fit, because he had some great form during the league, and then I think he had a bit of a hamstring worry, so they left him out that day against Cork, same as Harnedy. I think there's a lot of different players chipping in, and I think they could have a couple of live wires coming in off the bench as well. Just fancy them to get the job done this weekend. But some of it is based on what I saw last weekend, and it was probably a lot of emotion and a lot of energy that Waterford put in and still stopped short. And as well as that, in recent years, if you look at teams that have really gone at Limerick hot and heavy, Clare did it 3 times last year, and then they fell off the cliff thereafter. Kilkenny, even in 2019, beat them in that All-Ireland semi-final, threw everything at them. Really disappointing All-Ireland final performance then against Tipperary. If you look back through the teams that have really gone at them, they haven't backed up very well. So I think the stars are aligning a bit for a Cork win.
PWell 74 is coming in hot and heavy against me. Do you want to read that out?
Yeah, Tip dumbing down the GA. Shane, who brings a biro in their pocket to a match in 25 degrees of heat? Fellas waking up on Monday morning with blue legs, wondering what happened after a few pints. I always like going to a game, and even when I'm not reporting, tipping in whatever, because maybe in 150 years someone will find the program and to be like, it might actually mean something to someone, and Shane Stapleton didn't score on that game or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
He did. He definitely did. No, I mean, it's funny. I'm sure you're the same. There's always people, let's say more so you're going to a club game. There's always someone you'll turn around to and say, how many has he scored now? Because that person always does up. I know my aunt-in-law, she always updates. She always has the score, so would have always asked her. Just on the program thing, says Richard Hogan, I used a clipboard and blank sheet for scores, time, number, score. Yeah, so everyone's
reporting nearly. Yeah, in fairness, that's nearly like a report, nearly like how we do it.
Yeah, it looks like Richard Hogan is looking for our job, is he?
He's looking for my job as quizmaster as well, I think.
Speaking of which, let's quickly do the quiz while we think of it. Right, so the Punchestown Festival is this weekend, isn't it?
No, it's going on at the moment. It was on the last 2 days. It's on the next 3. But my knowledge of Punchestown wouldn't be on par with Cheltenham. I'm just putting that out there before we start.
Okay, looking forward to making an ape of yourself. So, can you name the owner of Risk of Thunder, who won a record 7 Latouche Cups at the Punchestown Festival?
JP McManus.
Sean Connery, the old James
Oh,
Bond actor.
that's very good. Yeah, that's good. I would not in a month of Sundays would I have gotten it though.
What is the name of the trophy for the Hunter's Chase run exclusively by people who live within the Kildare Hunt District?
Oh God, it's like something like the Bishop Court Cup it's the.
That's exactly it.
Yes, go on, you boy.
At the 2018 festival, Paul Townend sensationally pulled album photo around the last fence in error, causing much controversy. Can you name the horse that was taken out of the race in this incident and the subsequent winner of the race?
The storyteller was the subsequent winner. The horse that he brought out was ridden by Robbie Power, trained by Colin Tizard, and it wore the colours of the late Alan Potts. But the name does not, and he was
Finian's.
Really? No, Finian's
No. Oscar.
No, wouldn't have got it. No. Didn't go on too much. Like yourself.
Yeah. Great questions there from Richard Hogan. Catnap, Bernie's right. If Waterford don't block it up like they did against Limerick, Cork will rack up a big score. Dalton is fit, so is Harnedy. Detox 101. Opportunistically, Waterford have nothing at all to lose against Tip. They should have a fair rise against Clare and Tipperary. Let's talk about Limerick against Clare. I think this is going to be a war. I mean, again, you know, like people keep saying, geez, Limerick can't be as bad again. I mean, that would suggest that other teams can't improve as well. I'd be shocked if Clare don't improve from the Tipperary performance. I'd be shocked if Tipperary don't improve from that performance as well. Both of them showed frailties or weaknesses or areas that the opposition can get a bit of mileage from. I expect all of the teams to improve really here. So this is going to be a war, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a war. It generally is when these two meet. I have to say, Shane, mistakes aside, first half mistakes aside, I was pretty impressed with Clare. And it was, realistically, it was the mistakes that was the difference between the two teams. They got a run on Tip at a couple of different stages. They put up a big score, take the mistakes out of it. They would have conceded a hell of a lot less, obviously, too. They have to find a way to get Tony Kelly into the game. They need to be getting more out of Peter Duggan. Shane O'Donnell actually started really well in the first quarter and was on a lot of ball and was thinking a lot of play. Probably faded thereafter. I thought, just from a plus point of view, I thought Adam Hogan did a really good job on Ford. He was on that yellow, probably had to be taken off. But there were definitely plenty of pluses for them. And I definitely, it was just the mistakes at the end. It'll be interesting to see if Brian Lohan kept faith with Eamon Foodie for the second half. And I think that was, it was brave and bold kind of move, because a lot of people maybe would have expected him to come off. Will he keep faith with him? Will he keep faith with him again this weekend? I'm not so sure.
I think he definitely will. And you know why? Yeah, because Sean Flynn, I know I mentioned him already, but he was on Tipcast with myself and Shane Brophy yesterday, and he was talking about how good Foodie's puckouts were.
Yeah, Long in particular as well, yeah.
And how it resulted in a lot of scores for Clare, certainly possessions high up the field. I think that's the reason he's in the team in the first place. I mean, should the ball have been given back to him for that goal? Like, yeah, fair enough. He should have been.
No, stop.
Yeah.
No.
Look, do you know what? I'm probably trying to play devil's advocate somewhat. I'm maybe not trying. I'm trying to give him an out a small bit here, because it was his championship debut. It was a tough one. The first goal that went in, that's a nasty one. It just drops between the defender and the goalie. And if anyone got a flick, it would have ended up, look, I just feel sorry for him with the way it panned out.
Big time.
But in a lot of ways, he was quite good. And I'm not saying Eibhear Quilligan doesn't deserve a chance as well. Like, he's obviously done a lot of good stuff for Clare, despite having the odd mistake himself. But I just feel a little bit sorry for Eamon Foodie, considering, that he did do a lot right, despite the fact that the ultimate nightmare for a goalie had just befallen him.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, it was he bounced back very well in the second half, and even from, after the third goal, because he could have been spooked completely, in fairness. But I do think it's probably a 50-50 call in Lohan's mind. But the fact that he stood with Foodie at half time, I don't know if there's any conversations about whether he might be taken off or not, but he stayed with him. So it'll be interesting to see whether he sticks with him this weekend again, because had he taken him off at half time, that probably would have had, detrimental effects on his confidence for not just this year, but probably for, a decent chunk of time. But I have to say, I thought Clare were humming well at different stages the other day, even despite some of their big men not playing well. Aidan McCarthy looked really sharp. Mark Rogers was sharp at times. Maybe would have been disappointed with, a couple of shots that he had for points. But they'll have no fear of getting themselves up for what's coming this weekend. And funny enough, I don't necessarily think they need a win at the weekend. They need a really good performance, but I still think they can get out of Munster with 4 points. I did think if they beat Waterford and Cork, they'll get out of Munster.
But that's kind of, with the mindset that, look, everyone's going to beat Limerick. So even if you lose this, you just need to get more victories, across the other 4 teams, So I don't know, because
they won't be thinking like that. Don't get me wrong. They will not be thinking like that. They'll throw everything they have at Limerick like they did last year. And they caused Limerick more trouble than anybody did last year.
Yeah. When are you most likely to catch Limerick in the Munster round robin? Given the form over the last few years, it's in the last game, isn't it? Think last year, the draw. Think in 2018, they were. I mean, even though they weren't entirely true, they were hammered by Clare that day. Think of 2019, they put out a bit of a scratch team against Tipperary and were beaten. Generally, whoever's playing Limerick fourth on that form is probably at an advantage. So if you can beat them now, it guarantees that Limerick will be playing as hard as possible in the final game, which would actually be a double boost.
Oh, it'd be brilliant. Be brilliant, yeah.
But Clare, is it true to say that they have the most dynamic, classy forward line, but it's just everywhere backwards on the pitch? Then it's the problem. And they have David Fitzgerald to come back in the team, but is it in the backs basically where they're being caught? Are they being caught on the sideline? Tactically, did they leave themselves too exposed and John Conlon wasn't back far enough, ensuring that Jake Morris didn't have the run of the place? Was that part of the problem?
Yeah, and part of the problem there was Noel McGrath hitting a few points from distance early as well and making Conlon really think. And maybe the fact that David Fitzgerald wasn't in around the middle there, or wasn't maybe able to cover all the ground that he would, even up down around the flanks when he'd be there as well. They definitely won't be as exposed against Limerick anyway. And I just hope we get something like the Munster final last year. I hope we get one of those bruising affairs. There's probably a high likelihood of a sending off, isn't there? Realistically,
fingers crossed. I'm looking for some Limerick suspensions.
Will you stop? Will you? For Christ's sake, you're really clutching at straws now. But based on last weekend, there's going to be, all eyes are going to be on these kind of head high challenges, and obviously a couple of things that were missed when they played in the Munster final last year. But no, expect a really bruising affair. Expect the opposite of what happened when the two of them met in the same venue earlier on this year, also on Saturday night in the league. Clare, I'm not sure what Clare were at that night. Maybe didn't want to show their hand or whatever. I don't know. But
they were weren't they?
Yeah, they were terrible the same night. The fact that they have delivered a good championship display, they just threw in clangers in there as well. So I think, I think that's Limerick by a point or two after what could be a cracking game.
So in the Tipperary game, Tip scored 5 out of 6 goal chances, and I'm considering that ball that dropped short from Brian O'Mara that Jason Ford nearly flicked in as a goal chance. I mean, I don't know if he even counted as a goal chance. So Tip were very, very clinical with the chances that they had. I mean, Jake Morris, the way he's shaping up now with this season, if Tipperary go well, he's going to be humming nicely. Whereas Clare at the other end scored 3 of 7. And there were very good chances, an awful lot of them. They could have won this game. I mean, I don't come away from this thinking, geez, Tipper back. I mean, I always say Tipper back. But, I didn't come away from that game feeling really kind of thinking, wow, Tipper building towards something massive for this season. I think Tipper building, but I'm just still not sure for this season. But
it's so crucial to have the 2 points on the board, though. Still, you know what I mean?
Because Tip should improve from that, because they saw an awful lot of what went wrong for Tip, saw an awful lot of what went wrong for them. And how can they ensure that someone like Eamon Foodie doesn't do as much damage from the puck outs the next day? Do they have to adjust how they set up? And obviously, look, they'll be looking to take down Limerick the in the next game out if they can at all. But anyway, in the third round. But David Fitzgerald, I'm imagining he's going to come in for Peter Duggan here. I think Duggan has been a very good puck out option, but it just really hasn't happened for him. If you take out a couple of the early games in the championship last year, he had a tough championship last year. I'd imagine it's going to be David Fitzgerald, and I'm even thinking, will Aaron Shanahan get a chance from the start? Because when he came in, like, he looks like he's in great physical shape. Tony Kelly, by the way,
doesn't start though, does he?
He generally doesn't, but maybe it's just because you know what you're going to come up against Limerick. You're not going to get lovely 50-50 ball bouncing in front of Ian Galvin and Mark Rogers and so on. And by the way, Rogers is class. But like, are you going to have to sort of almost accept that we need someone really physical in there? If we're going to have to truck it long at times, we need Aaron Shanahan or Peter Duggan type figure in there. And it's a tough one for Galvin to have him starting in there also. So maybe we might try and use him off the bench.
Yeah, potentially so. Yeah, they have the options at least, Shane. They have different types, and like Duggan, a man scoring coming in off the bench would be a great option too, wouldn't it? For the last 15 or 20 minutes, because when he's in that type of mood, he's a wrecking ball. I just thought Tip had his number the other day, and even when he puts that long arm out to pick up the ball, they were kind of nearly playing his arm at times as well, very very smartly. And he just couldn't get on the ball. I wouldn't be a bit surprised, as you say there, if he's left in reserve and comes on, and when they need kind of a bit of a physical force in that last 15 or 20 minutes. But like, the fact that Hannon's not playing does open up a few avenues and ways of potentially getting at Limerick. Will Kelly go out and play 11 and try and roam and try and pull Dan Morrissey out a small bit so they can create a bit of space inside for some of their nippier lads? Like, I would say, like, Will
You're convinced that Morrissey will be playing 6, yeah? Because they don't want to put Kyle Hayes in there because it'll sort of decommission him as an attacking weapon.
Yeah, I think it robs Limerick of one of their most potent kind of weapons. They might put Hayes in 6 and put Dan Morrissey at 7. I wouldn't. I don't think that.
Could you put Nash there?
The team as well.
Could you put Nash there and then put Richie English in the 4 position? Now, obviously, Richie English probably isn't going to attack with the same sort of threat as Nash, but Nash would be very much freed up to drive forward because he knows that there's always going to be a man back there.
Yeah, he's still not free to go forward from the position he usually would be going. I think they'll plug someone in at 6, and I think it'll be Morrissey, and they won't move. Like, because you have to, the way when you're making a switch, sometimes you end up making 3 or 4 switches. I think they'll just make one switch, and it'll be Dan Morrissey in at 6, and that'll be Mike Casey in at 3, and nobody else will move because it doesn't upset the balance of the team.
Yeah, so Porter says here, a lot of media say the tip backs lack pace. How do you fix that? I don't think you can this season because Barry Heffernan's not there, Craig Morgan's not there. I'm not saying Paddy Cadell is a speed machine, but he's another guy who's able to move pretty well. And then Ger Brown being missing as well. That's a big absentees for Tipperary. Even Kieran Connolly, who we haven't even seen play championship action. And by the way, Tipperary had 5 championship debutants last week, which is not to be sneezed at either. Another question here: Ryan Taylor is so dangerous running with the ball. Needs to get his head up a little quicker though. I think he's such a good player. I mean, he was an all-star last year for me. I don't know if he's ever going to get the credit that he deserves. But when you mention, like, he wore 11, but he'd be around midfield, sort of moving up and down. But like, when you're talking about players that could hurt Limerick, I think based on his performances last year, he could. And I don't think he's afraid to run right up the centre where it's going to hurt. And all the more chance for Clare to profit from it if Declan Hannon isn't there.
He gets it. He sees the gap and he just goes through it. The afterburners go on. A lad is with him, and then all of a sudden Taylor is just kind of gone. He got a lovely score off the hurl in the early stages of the game. I think Limerick probably underperformed a bit around the middle of the park the other day as well. I wouldn't say Will O'Donoghue, he had a good game, but definitely not one of his better games for Limerick. And it was funny because Shane Dowling was saying on Friday night in Roemore that he would have been, put out over Jamie Barron getting the All-Star over him a couple of years ago after dominating him in that All-Ireland final. But he didn't really get the upper hand the other day. And there's a lot of things you just expect a lot of people to be a lot better on the Limerick side than they were last weekend.
Oh,
six-day turnaround as well, Shane, which is tricky too. You have to throw that into the mix as well. From a Limerick point of view, Waterford obviously have 7 days, and I know you're saying they're finely honed athletes, but 6 days is tough going. So they'll be having to have to. I think from what I heard was they were in the pool on Monday morning, and they were. I think they were supposed to train on Tuesday, but they ended up training on Monday instead. And I'd say there was a few home truths told.
So P-Well 74 is going for me here. You might read that out and tell me, is it justified?
Jays lads, 10 teams playing this weekend, and Tip isn't one of them. But there's but there's more talk about them. Yeah, well, to be fair, now the only thing I'll say about that is that's nothing new for the man on this side here.
Is that being fair? I don't know.
To be fair, you weren't here on Monday, so I wouldn't mind getting your 2 cents on Tip. But I think we have your 20 cents on Tip now, let alone your 2 cents.
Just like we've seen historically, Limerick aren't going to man mark lads, even if they're doing a bit of scoring. Like I suppose Ger Brown last year, don't like mentioning Tip. Tony Kelly in the past, they're not going to man mark them. They're not going to man mark him this weekend either. Like there's no question about it. They're not going to send a Cathal Barrett type character off after him. So he should get more opportunities to score here. The only thing is, I was hearing from Clare people after the game, of course, they were lining up their excuses that he wasn't entirely fit for the game last weekend. Like maybe that's one of those things that you often hear, but I don't know.
I've heard that a lot now. Like I heard that after the All-Ireland semi-final last year as well. I heard definitely 2 or 3 times before that as well. So I don't know. I can't. Yeah, I've heard that anytime he's underperformed, I've heard that after. I'll put it to you that way. And he's a class player. And I do expect him to be a good bit better this weekend. And he will get a bit more freedom. He won't be tagged like he was the other day. Have to just mention, I'll bring up Tip for a second here. Like Barrett is much maligned at times, particularly from people outside of Tipperary. He's a bit of a target for people, but I thought he did a super job the other day. And he's just, yeah, I'm a big admirer of his on the pitch now, I have to say.
Who's going to man mark Cian Lynch? Is it going to be John Conlon? Are they going to make a different plan for him? Maybe David McInerney?
It won't be John Conlon. I wouldn't have said, well, McInerney did a good job on Hegarty in last year's Munster final. I don't know if that's his type of role. One thing I have to say about Clare is as well, Dermot Ryan's a good shooter from distance, right? But they cannot shoot every time from 100 yards. It's debilitating when it doesn't go over. Yeah, but it's a killer. And when you have guys inside, particularly nippy lads, when you have an Aid McCarthy that's lighting it up as well, it was a killer at times the other day. They need to be smarter on the ball. And it's one thing shooting when your feet are planted and you're totally in the front foot and composed, but there's some shots the other day that were rushed, and it's just, I just think they're undercutting themselves, and there's no need to be doing it. There's times to do it, and there's times not to do it. And from David McInerney's point of view as well, if I was him and I was his manager, I'd be getting him to play the ball in more and shooting a lot less.
I'd be telling him you're dropped if you keep shooting, because like I'm looking early in the game, 6 or 7 minutes, David McInerney shot drop short, 7 minutes, Dermot Ryan wide. 9 minutes, Dermot Ryan, wide. I mean, you're killing your team here. Stop shooting. You were in the backs because you were a back. Play the ball in. I would rather 3 balls go in low to Mark Rogers or whoever is in there, Shane O'Donnell, rather than Yeek scoring 1 from 3 or 2 from 3. I want the balls going in because, I mean, for a defender, what's better than like knowing I'm isolated in space here and watching some back hitting a shot wide from, you're just like, oh, thank God. And everyone thinks you're playing well, then all of a sudden the corner forward's getting frustrated. He's getting whipped off even though he's been, killed by his teammates out the field. So, yeah.
Do you know what's worse, Shane, is that if you're playing cornerback or whatever, and you know your man has you beaten if the ball is played, and he knows he has you beaten, and he gets very frustrated when the ball doesn't come in. And you could see it in his body language. You could see it in some of their body language as well. And it's just a killer. And they'd stop making the run if they know the ball isn't going to come most of the time as well. So I think that's something they really need to iron out.
Yeah, early in the game, I thought Waterford were at it a little bit too much as well. I remember Conor Prunty, maybe Caleb Lyons, and there was one other player as well. Actually, I had it written down here. I'll just double check. Yeah, Ty de Burka. They all had shots from distance, and you're like, fair enough, you can't get the ball in, but maybe that was the problem. They were struggling to get the ball inside to where Limerick had the numbers, so they felt they had to shoot. But maybe then you need to pick your team slightly differently and get shooters out the field. Okay, so this weekend, how do you think that game is going to go if you were to put your neck on the line?
Yeah, I think Limerick will win. It'll be probably 2-3, I'd say. I think it'll be a real attritional battle again. I wouldn't understate the Hannon loss. I think he's a massive loss, but I still think they'll get the job done. I expect them to be up a few gears. Up plenty of gears from last weekend. Saying that, I expect Clare to find a few gears as well, and I think their attack could pose them trouble. Like if they're able to get, let's just say of Mark Rogers, Shane O'Donnell, Tony Kelly, and Ed McCarthy, if 2 of them are humming even, they're going to be well in the game. If 3 of them are humming, they have a great chance.
Yeah, there's part of me that thinks that Clare could actually shock the hurling world here.
Wouldn't it be brilliant for the championship if they did? Because then you have Limerick on 2, Clare on 2. Maybe you just say if Waterford won as well, that'd probably be the perfect scenario because you'd have Waterford on 2, you'd have Tip on 2, Cork could win their second game and be on 2 as well. That's what we want, and that's why, and I know we'll chat about Leinster in a minute, that's why Antrim getting points off Dublin was just like re-energized Leinster because it opens it up, and we'll see what they can do against Wexford, and we'll chat about that in a minute. But you don't want that predictability. And listen, it's not predictable, because would you be surprised if Clare turned over Limerick at the weekend? Not one bit.
So I wish John Keenan was refereeing this match. I'm not actually entirely sure who is refereeing this match, but yeah, look, there's part of me that's like, Clare can win this because Declan Hannon's not playing, because Limerick weren't their normal flowing selves last week, because maybe they seemed like their feathers were a little bit ruffled, red card, a couple of other challenges that probably could have got that. What John Kiley said afterwards about the softening up exercise in terms of everything being said about them, that it was basically their All-Ireland to be won, and just, trot on from there. But then I look at the Clare defence, and I think it comes down to that I think ultimately that's why I think Limerick will see it out, because there's just going to be too many opportunities presented in that Clare backline. So that's why I'd go with Limerick. Just
a quick one, Shane. Colm Lyons is refereeing that game. He's refereeing the Limerick-Clare game on Sunday. Johnny Murphy from Limerick is refereeing Kilkenny and Galway, and James Owens is the man in the middle for Cork and Waterford. Okay, so let's actually move on to the Leinster Championship. Henry Shefflin against Derek Lyng. They're both 44. I presume they played on underage teams together. Presume so, yeah. Did Derek play underage? Actually,
I'm hoping that some of our viewers might have a quick answer on that one.
I'm not sure if he did.
Do you know, I was trying to look up some like minor panels and whatever. The way you'd often find a match program from 97 or whatever, to see if I could see them both in the same team, and I couldn't find anything. So that neither disproved or proved the point. But they both know each other so well. I saw a picture from I think it was an extension of some commercial deal from 2009, and there was a photo call down in Nolan Park, and you had Henry Shefflin sitting down beside Derek Lyng. Shefflin is there bouncing a ball, smiling from ear to ear. Lyng is there dour enough, and then there's Cody standing behind the two of them. But yeah, Lyng against Shefflin this weekend. Who's it more odd for? It's probably more odd for Henry, obviously, but he's used to coming up against Kilkenny now after last year.
Yeah, but not used to going back to Nolan Park. I think that adds a little bit of spice to it. It was one thing them playing in Salt Hill last year and even playing in Crow Park. But he's going back to Nolan Park against his own county, facing off against an old teammate on the line. A heap of old teammates, actually. Conor Phelan, Peter Parry, Michael Rice as well. And obviously Derek on the sideline. Then you have, he's managing against a load of guys that he's had great success with at club level in Nolan Park. His nephew Owen Cody as well. It's definitely way more weird for Shefflin. I don't think it'll be that weird for Lyng at all. I just think the thing for Lyng is this is the biggest game yet under his reign, and if they're able to get a result against Galway and Nolan Park, it'll put them really on the front foot for Leinster. I think that this is there's a couple of games to really look forward to this weekend, but this is definitely one of them, just for all the kind of fanfare and hoopla that'll be around it as well. I'd be expecting a fairly bumper crowd in there too. I think the last time they played there in a Leinster Championship game was that cracking game where Galway finished with 13 players. TJ finished with 2-11. Galway won by a point for their first ever championship win in Nolan Park, and then ended up dumped out of the Leinster Championship a couple of weeks later.
Richard Hogan says Derek didn't play underage for Kilkenny like Martin Comerford. Henry did play underage, says Cash is King. So how important is the venue here? I mean, remember 4 years ago, Galway came down here and they didn't have Joe Cannon because obviously he was injured. And they gave an excellent performance and picked up a huge win. TJ Reid was unbelievable the same day. But
Pat Mannion,
2019...
I think, got 7 from play as well, didn't he, the same day, I think.
Yeah, and I thought Jason Flynn was quite good that day in terms of setting up chances. But that was Galway's first win at Nolan Park in Championship for 70 years. Now, to be honest, how many times would they have played there in Championship?
Probably twice or 3 times,
yeah,
if even.
Sometimes those stats are absolute nonsense in the world of the GAA. But that was a huge win. Do you reckon they can go down there and do it again? Look at it last year. 1 win each. Both were fairly, like the first day obviously was very dramatic, and there was the handshake between Cody and Shefflin and so on. It's a little bit like Thomas Tuchel and Anthony Conte, or Antonio Conte and Anthony Conte.
Anthony, he's Irish now.
Yeah. And then there was the Leinster final when, as Shefflin kind of said himself after the game in the press conference, they basically didn't show up in the last 20 minutes. What way is this one going to go?
I'm still finding it hard enough to get a read on Galway. Galway should have been beating Wexford by 6 points without Lee Chin and Damien Recht. Realistically, I think Henry has gone after this. You always say the half back line is a platform, but he's really loaded his half back line with Mannion, Dahi Burke, and Joseph Cooney, and probably maybe Fintan Burke to come in there. Now, I do think for the balance of the team, if you're putting Fintan Burke in wing back, I'd probably be pushing Joseph Cooney up a small bit because I just think it balances the team a bit better. Probably play him either midfield or half forward. I think you might give you an option of half forward as well. They don't maybe have a hell of a lot of ball winners at wing forward, and he obviously played wing forward when they won the All-Ireland in 2017. I was impressed with Jack Grealish last weekend as well. I thought he did a very good job on Rory O'Connor. But they should have been winning that game the other day by what they did. And Evan Island won't be getting the space against Kilkenny that he got against Wexford. They just let him kind of roam around. And as I told you before, he got 6 of the best from me from play in a challenge game one day. And it was like with the challenge game for him the other day. He was just let kind of roam around. I think every one of them was off his left as well. It'll be way more tighter. It'll be way tighter. There'll just be a lot more pressure on him. But Galway had a fairly competitive game last weekend. It was very competitive, obviously. Kilkenny had a no contest last weekend, realistically, and I think they put 29 points up on Westmeath, only conceded 7, but to be very disappointed with butchering a couple of goal chances. Like you would expect them to be hitting, 329, 429, hitting the back of the net. Saying that, Galway didn't hit the back of the net last weekend either, and they would have been. While I said their defence was good the other day, they were hit early with the first goal. First goal wasn't great. Was McDonald in the square? He probably was. But they conceded 2 goals early. They bounced back well from it. But I wasn't blown away by Galway now last weekend, I have to say.
No, but they did recover from that. I mean, That's a fair dagger early on to concede a couple of goals, and still they didn't panic. And even if you go back to some of their league games, wasn't it against Clare when they went well behind early on? They stayed the course and they ended up winning the game fairly comfortably. Like they were certainly the better team throughout that game. I feel like there's so much more in Brian Kincannon. We haven't seen it in the last year or two, and definitely injuries explain it to some degree. But there's more in him. There's probably more in Conor Whelan. We need to see a little bit more from Conor Cooney, and we need Evan Nyland to frank his form on a big occasion in somewhere like Nolan Park, where it's the atmosphere is going to be brilliant there. I think it's going to be really, really good. So just in terms of that more or less non-contest, if we can be harsh enough to call it that, last weekend. Kilkenny 29 points, Westmeath 7. God, I can't think the last time that a team scored just 7 points in a championship game, certainly at senior level. But TJ Reid, there was 11 different scorers for Kilkenny, which is good from their point of view. I think they'd be somewhat surprised to not score a goal at all, but I'm imagining that if Westmeath are only scoring 7, that they're fairly defensively set up. Now, I haven't seen the game, just the highlights, but that would be what that would suggest to me. But often you see teams, they lose by double scores or triple scores. This isn't far off quadruple scores.
It's more.
7 4 is 28. It's more actually. It's more actually. We're not mathematicians here, are we?
Great at type tables. Mathematicians or mathematicians.
Mathematicians, I love. But TJ Reid, he scored 4 from play. Adrian Mullen scored 6. John Donnelly scored 4. I mean, John Donnelly, anytime I see him dropped from the Kilkenny team, I always wonder why, because he's such a hard worker, a ball winner. He's a classy hurler.
He's brilliant hands. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Like some of the best hands in the country.
Yeah. Like, part of me thinks that Galway can go down and win this game because, but like, there is that whole thing that they seem to have the hex over Kilkenny in the last couple of years. There was, that back-to-back where Micheál Donoghue had those wins over Brian Cody as Galway manager. But it does feel like in the last couple of years, remember the 2020 Leinster final, the winter one when Shane O'Neill was in charge and they played with the sweeper from the get-go and you wondered, do they really need to? And they had Joseph Cooney full-back, more or less marking TJ Reid, and I think they got overly kind of fussed over what Kilkenny were doing rather than playing to their own strengths that day. And obviously they've lost some of the games in the meantime and won that one last year in Salt Hill with the contentious free. I'm kind of torn on this a little bit. I think Galway have the quality, but it depends on, do you go to Nolan Park and sort of freeze on that stage like Cork did in the league semi-final, or do you sort of do what you did in 2019 and just come out and hurl with abandon? And when I say that, I mean, you don't play setting up your team to contain totally the hosts. Like, obviously, they'll have to have a particular man marker for TJ Reid and so on. But you go out there and you try and think, well, how, as much as possible, can we play to our own strengths?
Totally, yeah. I think the midfield battle will be very, very interesting. The last day, Kilkenny started Paddy Mullen and Dara Cork in midfield, and it was Tom Monaghan and Ronan Glennon. Like, I wouldn't have Dara Corkin down as a natural midfielder, number one. Just something quickly, actually, last weekend, the Shamrocks broke a record. They had 6 championship starters. There's never been more than that, or there's never been 6, I think, even from any club. I think the Fenians, Bennett's Bridge, and James Stevens all had 4, might have had 5 and a couple of subs, but 6 championship starters from the one club is an interesting one. I think that midfield battle will tell a lot. Will Conor Fogarty, who probably lost out based on the league final, will he come back in now? He's so reliable. Maybe at this stage of the day, whether he has the legs to keep up with the Limericks of this world is one thing, but I think he's tailor-made for this game in Nolan Park. Absolutely tailor-made for it, and I'd be surprised if he doesn't come back in. Yeah, very hard to call this one, isn't it? Galway were hot and cold. They were decent in Salt Hill last year. They were atrocious in that Leinster final, really poor. They kind of limped over Cork in the quarter-final and then delivered a brilliant display in the All-Ireland semi-final. Maybe you could say I'm sitting on the fence, but I think it could end up a draw, and I find it very hard to separate the two of them.
I find it very hard to listen to you say a draw. I think you're just too windy to call.
Why does the draw not happen in games from time to time? No,
it doesn't. Well, the odds are always against it anyway. No, but I think like Martin Keown didn't start last weekend. I could see him starting this game because they'll need that bit of physicality and the work rate that he brings. And like, he's become quite a good finisher a lot of the time. Another point that I wanted to make relates to Kilkenny's confidence. Where is that at the moment? Because it must have taken a fair bit out of them to lose in the manner that they did in that league final. And from Henry Shefflin's point of view, if he's looking to win Leinster this year, which of course he is, this is a real chance to sort of strike a blow against Kilkenny's confidence even more so if they can win in Nolan Park.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. And he obviously won't be saying that or anything like that, but I'm sure he'd love to go back to Nolan Park and get a win. To say it was a brilliant atmosphere there in 19 when they played, and it'll be. I'm not saying it's going to be anything like it, but kind of the atmosphere of 2013 when Tip and Kilkenny met in the qualifier. There's so many different subplots to this, shall we say. Should be a cracking game. Yeah, I'm finding it very hard to say. I don't know exactly what sort of Kilkenny we're going to get, but I would be expecting a bit of hellfire and brimstone after that league final no-show. And I hope in Galway back up last weekend a bit as well. Yeah, I think it'll be a draw. I think around 8-1 or so, you could do a lot worse. Porter
says, any quiz question this morning, Michael?
Maybe before the end of the show.
You just have to think of one first.
I have a couple here in emails. I just need to put them together as we're moving.
Okay, let's see. Next thing we can move on to. So I'm going to go with a Galway win there. I think it's as good an opportunity for them. And look, both teams are going to get through anyway. But ultimately, I think Galway have a chance of winning this game. Let's move on to Dublin against Westmeath. So Westmeath, as we've already kind of mentioned, they took a heavy beating last week. Do you think in some respects they were targeting this game? That it was a bit of damage limitation against Kilkenny with the hope that, because they drew last year with Wexford, they feel like maybe the tier just below the regular winners of Leinster are the teams that they can get after. And Dublin probably don't have the scores, and Westmeath feel, given that they were neck and neck for an hour last year in Cusack Park, that maybe they could do Dublin this time out.
Well, Killian Doyle had a hamstring injury from the league relegation game. I don't think they're ever going to risk him against Kilkenny the first time out. And I don't know if it's not something you're probably going to talk about as a management team to your players. But there are realistic games that they can win in Leinster, and there are games that they're not going to win. There are 3 games that they can win. They can potentially beat Dublin. They were brilliant against them last year in Cusack Park. They could potentially beat Wexford, who they drew at last year, and there won't be that much between them and Antrim. So I think
it's like Cork this weekend. They'll target a win against Waterford. They'll put out a dummy team because they know having a chance against Tip, and then they'll target the last couple of games.
Yeah, whoever said about I'd love to check the amount of tip references for a show actually. But I'd say Killian Doyle will probably be back this weekend. I think Tommy Doyle kept Big Ronan Hayes under wraps big time in Cusack Park last year. I think he might have got a score off him actually.
He did, he ran him the other way and got a great score.
So, and he was actually very good last weekend again, in the face of, a barrage of scores from Kilkenny. They'll see it as an opportunity, but Dublin will surely be a bit stung from that Antrim game. They got something out of the game that they probably, on the balance of play, didn't deserve to get anything from. So you'd be expecting a bit more from them this weekend, but it's definitely an opportunity from Westmeath. And if Westmeath were able to get something out of it, it makes the Leinster Championship even more of a lottery. And that's what you want. But we want to be talking about this. You want to be talking about the chance of something happening. It might not happen, but there's a realistic chance of it happening. They got that draw against Wexford last year. Can they get something out this weekend? Possibly. I don't think they will, but there is a possibility still.
Yeah, like last year, one of the players that made the difference ultimately for Dublin was Rian McBride, and he's not there. He was doing some nice scoring last year in this match. Another thing I'd say about, that I'm the president of the Sean Brennan fan club when it comes to Dublin goalkeepers. Made a great save last week, and Conor Johnson got the rebound. That was obviously important enough in terms of giving Antrim that bit of extra sort of belief as that game went on. Donald Burke, he scored 1-9 for Dublin. Keane O'Sullivan scored 6, including a sideline. Keane Boland and Paul Crummy and Dara Gray and Alex Considine, they also got points. But do you think Micheál Donoghue's a little bit unsure where this team is going to be going this year? I mean, let's go back 4 years ago. It was neck and neck between all 4 sides going into the last round. Anyone could go through. Whereas now it feels like there's Kilkenny and Galway, and then there's kind of the rest.
Well, I think, like we've said it ad nauseum throughout the year, when you lose Crummy, when you lose Rush, when you lose McBride, when you lose Mark Schutte, when you lose Cian O'Callaghan and a couple more, I think this wasn't the hand he expected to have going forward this year. And they're all, every one of those players I've mentioned are nearly central players, be it Crummy at centre back or midfield or centre forward, Rush at centre back or centre forward or full forward, McBride out around the middle, Schutte probably in the inside line, Cian O'Sullivan cornerback / fullback. They're all big players, and there's a lot of guys coming in and having to learn on the job very, very quickly. The only thing is, I don't know how much pressure is on Donoghue in a way as well. I don't think there's much expected of them this year, given the personnel they're missing and the new faces that they're thrown in. But just anything other than a 7 to 8 point win is non-negotiable for Dublin this weekend, realistically.
Okay, because I don't even think they won by quite that much last year. I think they might have won by 6. I'd say getting a victory at all. Like Derek McNicholas, who's the last player? He scored a point last weekend. He must be 37, 38. Did he make his debut in 03 or 04?
03, 04, yeah, it's bad.
I wonder, so he must be the oldest championship scorer in an awful long time. Can you think of anyone that would have scored at a high age?
Tony Brown, I'd say. Tony Brown got a goal in a Munster final
in 2010
when he was 37, because he retired in 14 or 41, I think, and he probably got a score in one of the years that followed. But geez, there wouldn't be many now. He's still going strong. He only came back to the squad late. Derek McNicholas did. they'll need everyone this weekend, and they'll need Killian Doyle humming. And you'll be hoping that he was nearly ready to go last weekend, and they just looked at the bigger picture a bit more.
Yeah, I think Dublin will be very happy that this is a home game this weekend. Anyway, Parnell Park, 6 o'clock Saturday evening. Hugh Paddy says that Dublin struggling for depth. Westmeath will 100% target this game. Could be a bounce from Dublin after last week. Emil89 argue that Antrim Club hurling is stronger at senior level than Dublin and Wexford. They had the hurlers for a good 15, maybe not enough for a panel, but definitely strong enough to beat either. Okay, so Antrim are against Wexford this weekend. It's at Wexford Park. Do you feel that Wexford carry forward a bit of kind of ill will? I suppose it's a bit of an exaggeration, but kind of this feeling that we're going to show Antrim after, you know, the draw that they had a couple of years ago up in Corrigan Park in the league, that they're like, we're never going to be caught by them again.
Oh, I think that's a bit disingenuous, to be honest with you, to an Antrim team that got a draw against Dublin last weekend. I don't think they'd be thinking anything about it.
Are you suggesting I'm disingenuous?
Yeah, most of the time, the majority of the time. Hugh Paddy just says there as well, speaking of Tony Brown, is he on the tip backroom team? What's his role? I think he's
he is performance coach.
Performance coach, yeah. I just
whatever that means.
I kind of laugh at that role, but anytime I'm ever chatting to John Milan, he could not sing higher praise of Tony Brown. Tony Milan asked when social media was starting, he asked Tony Brown, he's like, you know, social media think I should be on it or whatever, and Brown just said, no, it's not for you, John. And he's never gone on social media since. But Tony's a bit of a confidant for a lot of guys, even those ex-Waterford guys. I think he was really well received at Waterford last year. I think he's been pretty well received at Tip as well. But from an Antrim point of view, like if they can follow up last weekend, it would blow Leinster open. And they're coming down, they're making like a ridiculous trip down the East Coast. It's a monster of a trip. It's an evening game. I think they're coming down on the Saturday, and they're actually staying over the Saturday night and leaving the day after the game. But they were brilliant last weekend. At least they weren't left with nothing. I'll put it to you that way. At least they have something to show. And I just said it on the Monday show as well. I was watching the Wexford game the other day, and there was a conversation between Chin and Dar Egan with about 15 minutes to go, and the game was going away from them. And it just looked to me, it was just like, even between the two of them, we probably need to box clever here. We don't need to throw you in here with the best will in the world. It's going to be near impossible to turn this game around. We're playing Antrim next weekend. We know Antrim have to have a point on the board already, and that was a beneficial position for Wexford to be in, to know that. And I'd expect Chin to be out this weekend. Maybe I don't know what the crack is with Rec. I think he picked up something in the warm up. Now Chin's is an AC joint, which is a nasty enough injury, and he's a big man, and he's going to shift punishment as well. So I'm not sure.
That's the way he plays. Like.
Yeah.
You know, he's an excellent player. That's the way he plays. So he's going to be in contact. Do you think, like, Dar Egan will be desperate for a win, but do you think he needs to just say, I've got the team that should be able to win this game at home in front of a crowd in Wexford Park, and I need to do it without Lee Chin and give him every opportunity to play in the following games? Like, that he has to make a bit of a calculated gamble here. Like, should Wexford win this game without Lee Chin? No, they may not, but should they?
Oh,
they should.
They're just about.
They've still got Conor McDonald. They've got Conor just about. So if he's playing, okay. So if Wexford have Lee Chin playing and he's fully fit, what would you predict would be the handicap for this game?
It's funny you asked that, because I asked Deise on Monday, what's Lee Chin worth to your team? How many points is he worth to your team? And I think he's worth. Take the freeze out. I think he's worth 4 or 5 points to Wexford. Between scoring, setting up. So like if Chin is playing the handicap, I don't know what the handicap is at the moment, but the handicap is probably 5 or 6, I'd say. If he's not playing 2 to 3, I would think. Now they're obviously playing. They've been playing Division 1 hurling for a long time. Wexford have, and they've gotten some great results to beat Kilkenny in the championship last year. But like, Hannon's only just back. I know he has a game under his belt. Liam Ryan is only just back. Dermot O'Keefe kind of laboured off in the game. We don't know if Damien Reck is fit. Don't think Shane Reck is fit. Paddy Foley's not around. Rory Connor's not long back.
I reckon they won't start him, and they'll just see how the game's going. And so the handicap at the moment is 5 points. But I'm sure the bookies are taking into account whether Lee Chin can start or not, and maybe they're thinking that he probably won't start, but they'll bring him on if they need him. I think that we don't know the severity of the injury. We haven't seen the scans or anything like that. But if it's any way a risk of him making that even worse, they have big fish to fry. I know they could end up putting themselves in a terrible position if Antrim, who are playing well, if Antrim come and sort of shock them down at Wexford Park. But I just don't think you can. I think you have to trust your panel to some degree. They still have good forwards. I've already mentioned Conor MacDonald. Charlie McGuckin's obviously an excellent player. Liam McGovern, Cathal Dunbar, Rory O'Connor. I think they do have to trust these players.
They're playing Dublin next week as well. And
that'll be a physical game.
Yeah, but that'll be viewed as many as the de facto game to decide who's third and fourth, and that's not been disingenuous to Antrim. That's just what everybody nearly thought beforehand.
Sure, everyone's disingenuous as far as you're concerned,
including myself.
Yeah. Emil89 says George O'Connor in '96 was pretty old. He'd won his first All-Star in 1981. He actually retired from club and county hurling in the same year. Shows how long he was on the go by 1996.
Someone mentioned Joe Dooley as well. Joe made his debut in '84 for Offaly. 2000.
Oh, we've lost Michael Verney there. Right,
no, back. I'm back, baby. He would have been late 30s, I'd say, playing in 2000.
So Darren Gleeson made some interesting comments after the game. He says that their hurlers are finally able to express themselves, and he goes, I thought the show what it meant to them, the emotive side of the game. Sometimes they pull on the Antrim jersey and they can't really show that emotion. They're not expected to show that it means something to them. But for this group of Antrim, it means a lot to them. So do you reckon that's the whole club division that he's talking about there, that it's almost like you can't show what it means to you because you can't be somehow suggesting that the county means as much as the club?
Well, yeah, I thought, Jesus, I hadn't thought about it.
That'd be my guess.
Yeah, just explain that to me again, so that people would think like the county game means that much that you would not be like maybe expected to show how much the county means to you.
Well, I'm just looking at those quotes and I'm thinking basically players haven't always been able to show what it means to them to play for the county and show that sort of level of kind of passion or whatever it might be. And I'm wondering, like, over the years, club division has affected Antrim. It has, like, because at times you've lads from some counties not pulling with our clubs, pulling with other lads from other clubs, some lads not talking out for the county and so on and so forth. But the last few years, it's felt like whoever the county manager has wanted has been involved. Yeah. So maybe they've now got to a stage that when they're on the pitch and if they want to give the old fist bump or whatever, which shows
give it the big one,
give it the big one, that it's almost like he's suggesting that they're now comfortable to do that everyone's comfortable in their skin with not only being a club hurler representing their parish, but they're now comfortable with saying, do you know what, I'm an Antrim man as well. Do you see where I'm coming from?
No, I see what you mean, because Offaly would have had club divisions, and one of the main reasons they were able to win in 94 and 98 was because they were able to get rid of club divisions that were there, and they were able to be, on a united front as a county team. There's a couple of other counties, just let me think. There's definitely would be divisions. There would historically be divisions within Wicklow as well, big time. And I'm sure there's more other counties that historically
Galway,
have that.
I remember previously it was said that Galway had so many problems and that was holding them back. And maybe, I don't know, would you credit it to Micheál Donoghue or Anthony Cunningham? Or I'm not sure entirely who you would credit with them turning that around, but definitely that was seen as a key to them finally going on to challenge and ultimately win the All-Ireland in recent years.
Shane, just on Flash's question, I'll just touch on this briefly. So Flash says, what's gone wrong with Wexford? Had so much hope for them start of last year. Now they're a complete shell of what they promised. Now, I hope this doesn't happen, but I think they are on a very, very slippery slope going forward, I have to say, as regards where their senior team will be in 3 to 4 years. When O'Hanlon goes, when Ryan goes, when McDonald goes, when Chin goes. I think they're on a very, very slippery slope, and they're in serious danger of not being competitive at Leinster and All-Ireland level, and potentially not at Division 1 level if they're not careful.
I'd be interested to get the thoughts of some of our viewers if they agree with that.
Now, Shane, I'll tell you another thing. A lot of people in Waterford would say the exact same thing. They would say
about them.
And if you look at their underage performances, like I think they're gone out of the minor and under 20 in rapid time this year. A lot of people would say, when Barron goes, when Ozzy goes, when De Borca goes, guys of that age, Stephen Bennett even is probably a little bit younger than those, that what's coming behind is not up to standard.
Your Pádraig Fitzgeralds, your Patrick Fitzgeralds, I mean, they're not bad players. The Dailies. I wonder will Cork Daly feature this weekend? I was sort of surprised that he didn't get a bit more of a role last week. A couple of the players that I do like that are coming through with Wexford would be the likes of Richie Lawler. Mikey Dwyer's probably pretty young even at this stage. I expect Oisin Pepper to have a big role in the coming years. Charlie McGuckin, I think, is very good. So I wouldn't be quite that down on them. There was something else I meant to mention, but of course,
now I would say all those guys as well were part of that under. Definitely Charlie was definitely playing today. Tip hit them for 8 goals in another 20 final, another 20 semi-final in Nolan Park, which would tell you the difference in standard between Tip and Wexford at that level, and that's just a case in point there. But I do think Wexford and Waterford are both on fairly slippery slopes.
Okay, Adrian McGrath says, coming to this late, lads, the issue for me without Gearóid Hegarty's hit was that it was so unnecessary. Describing it as a tackle considering the circumstances. The ball was gone dead, no need to do it. Sean Frayne says, I think Wexford will be fine long-term. Underage is genuinely competitive in a strong Leinster underage setup. Waterford definitely in trouble long-term. Underage and club is a mess. Will says that the hurling is boring. Discussion is the same discussion when Dub footballers were putting together their run. It's up to the other teams to make the step up or just wait for Limerick to start to slide.
I don't think hurling is boring, I have to say. And that's something that's never...
I think he's talking about the discussion. Is it more or less that it's very hard to analyse Limerick because they're so proficient in every position? Like, it used to be really difficult to analyse Dublin because it was just like, we'll talk about maybe can you crack the Cluxton kick out, and after that nobody really had much to say in terms of analysis, wasn't it?
And it's funny, Shane, it only has to happen for Limerick to lose the game, and then the whole thing is blown wide open, and that's the way it is. All of a sudden, it's gas. The wheels can come off, but like Dublin were beaten. I remember in 2020 after they beat Cavan in the All-Ireland semi-final, like there was that when Gilroy and Andy McEntee went into the studio not long after. It could have been. And Gilroy made some unique suggestions about what needs to be done and teams joining together, counties joining together and stuff like this. Then all of a sudden Dublin haven't been to an All-Ireland final since. Do you know what I mean? It can stop quite quickly. It can stop quite quickly. And it will probably be the same in Limerick's case whenever that does happen.
Yeah, okay. So there's other games on this weekend in the Christie Ring Cup. Derry are against Meath. Now, Meath, I'm sure, will be fairly rocked. Saoirse Bulfin and co. having lost to London last weekend. Mayo are against the Exiles, and then Tyrone will meet Sligo. I'll just go through the other fixtures, and you can throw any tuppence worth then that you like. Nicky Rackard Cup Round 3. Armagh will meet Wicklow. Roscommon will do battle with Donegal at that league, surrounded by trees there. Louder against Fermanagh, and in the Laurie Maher, Cavan against Lancashire. A few of my Coola erstwhile teammates, they'll be playing at Breffni Park there. And that one, Monaghan will face Warwickshire. Ray McCormick of Borris-Lee. I mean, I'm giving my own links here, I suppose, in terms of Borris-Lee. Ray McCormick is playing for Warwickshire this year. And then Leitrim are against Longford. Any tuppence word for us?
There's a fella from Borough playing with Lancashire, actually, against your Cavan boys. Cormac Kenny, good player. Was actually in a...
Will he be man-marking Nicky Kenny? Nicky Kenny, the Badger, he's scoring well.
Well, he'd be a good man to do it. He's a fit young fella. I was actually in a casino in Edinburgh about 2 months ago, and I was chatting to a fella that's a selector with the Lancashire hurlers. It's just mad who he could, like, from Cork. And I said, he asked me where he's from, and I said, Offaly. He says, oh, we've a lad playing with us. It's amazing. The GA is unreal. You're so close to knowing someone. It's a bit mad, yeah.
Yeah. Hurling 1, 2, 3, 4. Guys, do you feel inter-county players listen to GA pods? They 100% do. I know for a fact. And I know for a fact that big players who play in the big championship games, for example, Munster final last year, Ferrora and all that, I know that some of the main characters were watching it. So they 100% do. Well,
I put you this way. Pods weren't really a thing when I was kind of playing back in the day, but you'd always be reading the paper and you'd be on. I had to get off them at one stage, discussion forums and stuff like that, and you'd search for your name and you'd have boys absolutely eviscerating you.
What's the worst thing that was ever said about you? No, nothing to do with your hair, I presume.
Paul Nolan had a winner in Punchestown yesterday, and he's got beautiful hair. And I just said, it's nicest hair in racing after my own or whatever. But I don't think just like nothing like particularly bad. It's just like how is Verney
What
still
stupid
playing?
head?
No,
how is
Verney still playing Offaly? Like how is he getting his game there? All he does is foul. This kind of crack. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
But was anything untrue ever said about you?
No, nothing like that. No, nothing like that.
You didn't get the joke.
No, no, I know what you're saying. But people are, it's amazing how harsh people are and how they don't realize. I remember doing summer camps one time, and someone asked me, "Oh, do you play hurling or whatever?" And he said, "Oh, I do, yeah." I said, "Who do you play for?" I said, "Oh, I play with Burr, play a bit Offaly as well." And he's like, "Oh, you're the lad that got cleaned out against whatever." Your man was about 12 at the time, and I was just like, "Yeah," he's like, "Put it away." But I just had to get off any of them discussion forums and that. But you might venture back on them then when you had a good game, just to see if there's anything good said about you.
Yeah, like I don't go on I wouldn't really search for my name. The big lack of ego there would probably be the reason there, unlike yourself. But one of the lads sent it to me earlier this year when I took over Whitehall Colm Kills. There was he was mentioned in a forum or whatever. But the only comment was, yeah, he seems fairly sound based on his pads. So I didn't go looking, but that was grand to read.
They don't know you. They don't know you. They'll know you soon enough.
TV Street says, if you were in Tipperary, you'd get letters to the house. Count yourself lucky.
I always think this letters to the house thing is mad. It must be
what sort of a clown do you have to be?
Yeah, but there's a lot of them still flying around. John Kiley said it before the 18 All-Ireland, and he said even after winning the All-Ireland, I asked him at the next media thing they did, and he said, did you get any letters after? He said, like, he did. He got letters, even angry letters after. That's a big thing around towns and stuff like that. You could have people, you know, the way there's divisions within a club or within a town. You could have a lad that doesn't like a certain family in a town that would actually send a letter and cut out various letters from the paper and make up some sort of poison letter and send it to someone that he could actually meet downtown later on that night. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Okay, in the football this weekend, Derry are meeting Monaghan. That's going to be class in the Ulster Senior Football Championship. Maybe not everyone thinks that'll be class, but I think that'll be skin and hair flying. And Downer against Armagh. So I'm sure you've seen this week all the talk about the under-20 discussion. Like Conor Laverty was talking, I think last night after Down's brilliant win, he was talking about how 4 players, because of the whole under-20 rule that you can't line out for 2 teams within 7 days, senior and under-20, he was asked about the 4 players that had come to him saying, look, we want to play in this big match for the Down under-20s. And Conor Laverty gave them permission and they played the game. And now only one of them is probably in line to get game time or certainly to start this weekend against Armagh. But they're basically taken out of the equation this weekend. And I know we talk about protecting players and all that kind of crack, but Laverty made a great point afterwards. He said, well, how come it's okay earlier in the year when you have lads playing Sigerson one night and then the very next night they're out in the league for, whereas now, when it really matters, when the ball is flying, when everyone wants to play, you're telling them, no, you can't. Because he reckons that managers are going to treat players properly. They're going to be mindful of them. They're going to wrap them up in cotton wool. That isn't always the case. But, you know, I think at this time of the year, like managers are like, okay, how can I mind my players here?
Were you aware that the Wexford motion to Congress was changed by Central Council?
Will you explain the details of that?
Yeah, so the original Wexford motion was that you could play under 20, say midweek, and you could play senior at the weekend, but you couldn't do it the other way around. So you couldn't play senior on the Sunday and play under 20 3 days after, right? That was basically the premise of it. You might have got a couple of tiny details mixed up there, but the Central Council changed it. That was in February at Congress. The Central Council changed the rule to make it a rolling 7 days. So once you played under 20, you could not play senior within the 7 days after, right? So to me, that has fundamentally changed the motion that was passed to Congress, has it not? Like they're fundamentally different things. Clare went to the DRA last week because they wanted to try and get Adam Hogan and Patrick Crotty to be able to play the two of them. They failed apparently because they didn't lodge an appeal to the Central Council's decision within 7 days, which is just just mixing lads up in all sorts of red tape and that kind of crack. But to me, they have fundamentally changed the rule. And I think it's a strange one, and they're going to have to look at it again next year. But that is not the motion that I was of the understanding of that was passed the Congress. And I'd say you're the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so unfortunate for those 4 players. Now, they wouldn't all see game time, but down in Armagh is going to be a cracking clash. And it's so unfortunate for those lads that they can't be involved. It's a local derby match, and Down were very good the last day out, and their confidence is going to be there now. If they're beating Derry in the under-20, it's just going to bring a bit more of a feel-good factor. You would hope that a few more will travel to Clonus. I saw Danny Hughes writing in the Irish News that he would have liked this to be a home fixture for either of the 2 teams, but instead it's neutral. Can you imagine how good this would be in the athletic grounds or up in Park Esler, either of those? But Down, it feels like they're sort of building towards something now. The last couple of years, it feels like they've been in a little bit of a tailspin. But all of a sudden now, it does feel like they're humming.
Does, yeah. They didn't get promotion from Division 3, but they did some very good results in there. Coming from behind against Westmeath, gave Offaly a bit of a batter, and I think it was 11 points in the wind-up. The wheel has turned quite quickly. Kilcoo players that maybe wouldn't have been on board under previous management are on board now. They play quite like Kilcoo. There's that kind of defensive style. Can be a bit of an arm wrestle at the time, but a high-energy style game. That's an opportunity for them at the weekend. And were they to win, it would also have Tailteann Cup ramifications for... So Offaly play a semi-final this weekend, and if they lose, they're in the Tailteann Cup. Same with Down. But if Offaly win and Down win, Kildare are the next to go to the Tailteann Cup, and then Cork could be the next. So if both of them won...
Hold on now, Kildare are going to beat Dublin this weekend. They're going to no Tailteann Cup.
Okay, we'll play this clip on Monday morning, and we'll see how how accurate that is. But now, Down are the more likely of the 2 to go through to a provincial final. I think they'll smell an opportunity against Armagh, who haven't been, am I right in saying they haven't been to an Ulster final since 2008, something like that?
Against Fermanagh, went to a replay, of course, famously.
Yeah, that's it's a long time. And after being relegated to Division 2, they need to get to a provincial final, I think. Kieran McKeever, the selector and coach, keeps saying that they're not treating the Ulster that seriously, and it's all about the All-Ireland, which I find baffling, really, because winning an Ulster title, to me, this year, with the way things are going and with Rian O'Neill's injury, winning an Ulster title will likely be the height of what Armagh can achieve this year.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, the teams that are now able to rest up until the group stages in the All-Ireland series, they're at a little bit of an advantage, aren't they? I mean, seedings aside.
They are a bit, yeah. Shano, my phone is going to go dead now in a minute. So I just want to leave you with a bit on the Offaly game. So I was in O'Connor Park last Sunday. Good win against Meath. Meath aren't hectic, but our lads kind of shut up shop in defence. Have conceded very low tallies in the last 2 games. Championship 111 and 10 points. This is an opportunity as well against Louth. Louth came from behind against Westmeath after being 8 down at half time. And they're viewed probably now as the second best team in Leinster, I would say, by many, based on their championship performance the other day, but also based on their league. But Offaly are going to Croke Park for the first time since 2007 in a semi-final. They're not playing a big superpower. They've half fancied their chances. I think they might come up a little bit short, being honest. I think they might come up a little bit short. And even Louth's experience of playing in Croke Park in Division 4 final a couple of years ago, in the 3 final last year, in that game against Dublin this year at the end of the league, will probably just about see them home. And just the last one on Offaly as well. The Offaly 20s play an intriguing enough Leinster quarter final against Galway on Saturday, with a heap of those All-Ireland minor finalists from last year and a fair crew from that Offaly schools team as well. That'll be an interesting game. It'll be a fair barometer of where they're at. They didn't play Galway last year, but in that minor run. But Galway were beaten by Tip, obviously, by a score in the semi-final. But that'll be a cracking game as well. I should probably leave you before I'm unceremoniously cut off, because I think I'm on about 0.5% on my phone at the moment.
Right, we'll do it again on Monday. And I'll just go through another couple of fixtures. But yeah, we'll chat to you then. So Dublin are against Kildare this weekend. Last year, Kildare were sort of being talked up a nice bit heading into this game, ended up losing 5-17 to 115, having previously won the league encounter between the two out in Newbridge. Last year, Con scored 1 goal, Cormac Costello scored a couple, Kieran Kilkenny scored a goal as well. There's not too many people, I suppose, tipping up Kildare to win this particular game, but there's a lot of brilliant fixtures. What we're going to do now is finish it out by playing some of the early stages of the Varley, I should say, and Poacher show, and we'll be back again on Monday. And don't forget, we're brought to you by ourstore.ie.
This week, we'll discuss the games of the weekend. Obviously, there's the big ones. Well, we felt anyway. Roscommon and Galway and Connacht, Kevin Armagh in Ulster, and obviously Stevie's team down the result against Donegal. And we look ahead to next weekend's games as well. So, Stevie, I'm laughing here because obviously off air we're having a bit of crack. Yeah, down or back, baby.
As you said to me before, just settle. Listen, it was a significant win, obviously, for Down. It's probably Down's most significant win in the Ulster Senior Championship. From when, hard to remember, maybe 4 or 5 years, maybe, it's a huge win. Obviously, they've beaten a Division 1 team, and which is no beat now. Saying that, Down deserve a huge amount of credit. Conor Lavery had the boys very, very well organised, very fit. Played a very, very stringent counter-attacking game. Got a lot of bodies back. Conceded, I would say, probably, over 90% of the kickouts to Donegal.
Did they?
Oh yeah. Very, very content to do that. Got a bit of pressure on in the middle third. And relied on a really hard direct running game. Then look, there was a few championship sort of debuts. Young Danny McGill from Burn made his senior debut. I was just sort of thinking forward, like it was a big step for a young player like that. But he performed really, really well. And I think one of the biggest things that probably and post game was Pat Haver, where he spoke in his interview about how Laverty has given them a lot of belief. And I think that's something probably that has never really been a factor for Down people, because Down have that historical swagger of the way, and there's a confidence and an aura with Down teams. I suppose over the last couple of years, Paddy Tally's last year in particular, a heavy defeat by Donegal. James last year, obviously his hands were tied. It was a very late start, and actually what Donegal reminded me of this year was exactly where Down were last year. No manager appointed until the very last minute. No matter what anybody says, and you need to be well prepared for inter-county football these days. You need to have your work done. You need to have a lot of work done early. And if you don't have that work done early, you will be found out. You'll pick up injuries. You'll not have momentum. I thought Donegal on Sunday were they weren't hugely organised from an offensive point of view. They didn't really have many ideas. Physical conditioning, I thought they were well below par from what you would expect from a Division 1 team. Intensity levels weren't at the levels where I thought they would be at, and spirit and togetherness. As soon as Down cranked it, there just seemed to be a nearly an acceptance, like, this is happening, like, and just take it, and it's worrying times for Donegal. I was chatting to a few Donegal people after the match, like, and they were saying that it's obviously one of the darkest days in or one of the darkest moments in a long time. But then you go back to 2010, and I'll always have those images in my head of watching Donegal playing Armagh and Cross McLean, and poor John Joe O'Hurley. Players didn't fancy him as a manager, and as he was walking off the field, there was players behind him laughing. And they'd just been beaten by Armagh by 13, 14, 15 points. McGuinness came in. Ironically, obviously, McGuinness is involved with ourselves this time, but McGuinness came in and, completely transformed that group overnight, and all that probably was a mentality switch, and you've probably got to ask yourself the question, and yes, a manager is important, a coach is important, but ultimately it's what the fucking players do, and how the players respond. Players are very, very fickle now, very, very fickle. And I just felt, that Donegal players had a responsibility there as well. And maybe the quality just wasn't on the field. But certainly trying to patch things together in the space of 3-4 weeks since they get relegated, with the departure of Paddy Carr, with the nonsense going on in the background about Lacey, the whole Jim McGuinness thing being involved with Down and stuff, like it was a shitstorm, and Down actually just entered the storm at the perfect time and got a fantastic result and head into Sunday now with a lot of confidence.
So just get back to, obviously, McGuinness is kind of the headline name there. Like, what's his, like, Laverty is obviously a very young manager, and I'm absolutely delighted for him, and delighted for Down, to be honest, because the more competition goes through, the better. But with McGuinness, is he a coach, Stevie? Is he there every night, or what's his role exactly?
No, well, listen, look, obviously, Connor's come out in the media and told the media a very diluted role. He'll come in and take a few sessions, obviously, but obviously not there all the time. But look, from a mentality point of view, for a lot of young players in that squad, obviously to have a man of his caliber and experience in at any time is a huge lift and a huge boost. But it's also from a psychological perspective. A lot of Donegal people probably thinking, why is he not with us? If he offered his services to the county, and that this so-called dream management ticket had offered their services and they were turned down, and there's obviously major question marks need to be asked of the county board in Donegal and what went on. But look, I think it's probably unfair to spend too much time talking about Donegal, because I think what the important thing is obviously from a Down perspective now, they go into Sunday's game against Armagh full of confidence. And I think the fact that every single member of that management team and playing squad will believe they'll win on Sunday. Every one of them will believe they'll win.
Where is that game, Stevie? Where's that game?
Game's Colonus on Sunday at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to say, I just watched the highlights of that game. I have to say, Liam Kerr's goal. What a piece, man! An absolute the pickup.
And I've been watching Liam now since he's been playing colleges football. Liam went to a school, actually the school that the incoming president of the GA is the principal of St Paul's Basebrook.
Yeah.
And Liam had his school football out there. He moved from another school here in Down to St Paul's to do his A levels, along actually with a past pupil of mine in Kilkeel, Conor Clark. And I watched him play McCrory Cup football. I've watched him playing minor football, under 20 football. I've seen him in club action, obviously up close. He's broke my heart a few times at club level as well.
I bet.
An exceptional talent. Like, I'll give you an example. Last year we played his club in the first round of the championship. We probably threw the game away in normal time. It was 10-all at the end of normal time, or 12-all, I think it was, at the end of normal time. We were a point up, and Owen Murdoch kicked a brilliant score to take it to extra time. But Liam had been kept quite quiet, throughout the game. And what actually happened in extra time was they were a point up then, got into the last minute extra time, and there was a counter attack and just this blistering explosion of pace. And you could just see him getting further and further and further away from our guys. And he's probably one of the most explosive, exciting talents down, that there is. Like, and he's got raw pace. And that's one thing, and that Down probably have over a lot of counties, is to have those sort of pieces of individual brilliance that is creating a lot of goal chances for them. I still think we're a little bit one-dimensional with our attack. I think our attack is slightly a little bit one-dimensional. I think we're down to really progress. That's an aspect of their game that they're going to have to try and develop. I'm looking at the top sides like your Derrys, your Dublins. Looking at the width and the depth that they have, the cuts that they're putting, they're producing. The way they're moving the ball around the points in the forward line. We're probably still relying on a hard direct counter attack, or a piece of individual brilliance. And I think for the next, and it takes time. It'll take 2 to 3 years probably for Conor to develop that. But for the team to go to the next level, Down just need to add a different dimension to their attack.
Yeah, you were saying about Danny McGill there, the week back.
Yeah.
Was that his championship debut? Was it? They kicked off.
It was Danny's debut. So Danny's from the Burn Club as well. He would have.
So that's a segment of the show that between Poacher and Barley. So feel free to head to our YouTube page on Our Game to watch the rest of that. It really is brilliant stuff between the two lads. That's it for the show this week. We'll be back again on Monday to review everything else in the championship and all the major talking points.